Chapter 361. Go to watch net. As soon as Zi Yuan heard Wan Hongling's words, her expression suddenly became serious and she asked, "What can you do?" Wan Hongling said proudly, "I met Yan Hua today and asked him to borrow the Lyoha. Let's go." 7 K.O.M. Zi Yuan was stunned. "Why did you ask him to borrow the Lyoha?" Wan Hongling said with a smile, "The Lyoha was second Shirbua's personal sword in the past, and it is also one of the two swords of the Bahuang and Lyoha. Now that second Shirbua has caught Ao Wushuang, it is very likely that she has already obtained the Bahuang. As long as she gets the Lyoha back, the two swords can be combined. Once the Bahuang and Lyoha are combined, second Shirbua doesn't need to hide at all. She will definitely show up and directly attack the Fox Zen school." Zi Yuan's heart skipped a beat. She said doubtfully, "I roughly understand what you mean, but didn't second Shirbua go to get the Lyoha as soon as she escaped?" Wan Hongling chuckled. "I also thought that second Shirbua might have taken the Lyoha away. But when I met Yan Hua today and asked him, guess what happened?" Zi Yuan smiled slightly. "It must still be there." Wan Hongling clapped her hands. "Yes. The Lyoha is still there. It's unbelievable. We were so busy with all kinds of things that we didn't think of looking for the Lyoha as soon as possible. But second Shirbua didn't take it either. Sister Zi Yuan, don't you think it's strange?" There was a thoughtful look on Zi Yuan's face. She said, "It's indeed strange. Logically speaking, second Shirbua should have gone to get the Lyoha as soon as possible. With her cultivation, once she gets the Lyoha, it will be like adding wings to a tiger. But why hasn't she taken so long to get it?" Speaking of this, Zi Yuan suddenly said, "Don't delay it anymore. Go to Yan Hua's house and get it now. No matter what, you have to get the Lyoha first." Wan Hongling responded, turned around, and went out the door. Zi Yuan sat alone by the bed, frowning slightly, and lowered her head in thought. About half an hour later, Wan Hongling rushed back angrily. Before she entered the door, she shouted, "Sister Zi Yuan, it's terrible." Zi Yuan suddenly stood up and asked in a deep voice, "What's wrong? Judging from your appearance, could it be that the Lyoha is missing?" Wan Hongling's face was a little pale. She said, "Yan Hua, he said that his aunt, second Shirbua, took away the Lyoha." Zi Yuan frowned. "When did this happen?" Wan Hongling said bitterly, "I should have been there half an hour earlier for what happened just now." Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "If you had gone half an hour earlier, I wouldn't have seen you. In second Shirbua's current state, she would never show mercy to anyone who tried to stop her from taking revenge on the Fox Zen school. At that time, not to mention that you're her martial nephew, even if you were her own flesh and blood, I'm afraid she would still kill you." Wan Hongling let out a long sigh and said, "Although I don't like second Shirbua, I really feel bad seeing her like this. What's the difference between her and falling into the devil's way? Our Lingong sect is already short of manpower. Now second Shirbua is determined to go against the Fox Zen school, and you are also determined to help the Fox Zen school. Oh my God, why do you have to make our Lingong sect suffer so much? Could it be that God also wants to destroy our Lingong sect?" Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, "The clouds rise and fall, and the tide rises and falls. That's all. Hongling, everything in this world is just a fleeting cloud. Don't pay too much attention to it." Wan Hongling was angry when she heard this. She said angrily, "You are always like this. When it comes to your own affairs and the affairs of the Lingong sect, you don't care about anything. When it comes to Li Yundong, you are so nervous that you feel like you have lost your life. You still say that you don't like him." Zi Yuan's cheeks turned red at first, but she soon calmed down. She glanced at Wan Hongling faintly and said, "It's just cultivation in the mortal world. I'm worried about my cultivation, not Li Yundong." Wan Hongling moved closer to Zi Yuan and widened her eyes, as if she wanted to find some clues on her face. She said word by word, "You are deceiving yourself." Ziyuan shouted angrily, "You have no respect for your elders." Seeing that Ziyuan was angry, Wan Hongling secretly stuck out her tongue and changed the topic. "By the way, Sister Ziyuan, why do you think Second Shibwa waited until today to get the Lyoha sword? Why didn't she go earlier?" Ziyuan's face suddenly became very cold. Wan Hongling rarely saw Ziyuan show such an expression, and she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. Ziyuan said in a deep voice, "Second Shibwa didn't go to the Lyoha sword. There are a few possibilities. First, she might have been like us. She was too busy with all kinds of things, so she didn't go to get it." As soon as she finished speaking, Wan Hongling said, "Now that I think about it, I don't think it's possible, because for her, there is only one thing she wants to do, and that is revenge. But we have a lot of things to do and a lot of things to consider. Moreover, the enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. It's normal for us to not think of it, but it's impossible for Second Shibwa, who is hiding in the dark, to not think of it." Ziyuan nodded in agreement. She said, "You're right. So, there is a second possibility. This possibility is that Second Shibwa has been looking for it before, but she hasn't been able to find it. She didn't find it until today." Wan Hongling shook her head and said, "Yan Hua also said that Second Shibwa said this, but I don't quite believe it, because Second Shibwa can hide in the Fox Zen school for 9 years without being discovered. How meticulous and careful does she need to be to do this? I don't believe that she would go to Yan Hua's house to get the sword in the end." Ziyuan looked at Wan Hongling with appreciation. "You're right. Originally, if Second Martial Uncle didn't say this, I wouldn't be sure of this final possibility. But now that she said this, I can almost conclude that this sentence is a smokescreen, and the purpose is to confuse and guide us." Wan Hongling was also an extremely intelligent person. Her eyes lit up and she said, "Ah. Sister Ziyuan, what do you mean?" Ziyuan said in a cold voice, "Second Shibwa is very likely to have been with us all the time. Last time Li Yundong and I went back to the place where we had buried the body of the golden snake, it had already been dug up. At that time, we suspected that someone was following us, and their cultivation was higher than ours. Now, it seems that this person is most likely Second Shibwa. The reason why she hasn't gone to get the Lyoha is probably because she has been following us and can't get away." Wan Hongling frowned and said, "That's not right. Even if she is following us, she shouldn't be unable to get away 24 hours a day, right?" Ziyuan suddenly laughed and said gloomily, "What if she is among us?" Hearing this, even though Wan Hongling was usually fearless, she couldn't help but shiver at this time. Wan Hongling opened her mouth wide and wanted to say something, but when the words came to her mouth, she couldn't say them. It was as if Yan Fang, who had been hiding for 9 years, was standing in a dark corner and staring at her viciously, making her hair stand on end. Wan Hongling subconsciously looked around and said with a chill all over her body, "Sister Ziyuan, don't joke around. Don't scare me." Ziyuan said coldly, "Didn't you notice? The last time Second Shibwa appeared, it happened that everyone in the Fox Zen school had gone to buy clothes. They were all in the fitting room, which gave Second Shibwa a chance to get her yang spirit out of her body. Coincidentally, this time, when Second Shibwa appeared, the 3 Shirbas of the Fox Zen school happened to go to the market together. Hey, I hope this is a coincidence." Wan Hongling's scalp went numb when she heard this. She said, "Sister Ziyuan, Second Shibwa can't be so bold. She actually sneaked back to the Fox Zen school. This is too terrifying, isn't it?" Ziyuan laughed and said, "The more impossible it is, the less willing people are to doubt and believe it. Second Shibwa took advantage of this to make us think that she had escaped far away, but in fact, she sneaked back. This is called the darkest place under the lamp." Wan Hongling felt a chill in her heart. She said, "Then who could it be?" Zi Yuan pondered for a while and said, the 3 Shirbas of the Fox Zen school are the most suspicious. It should be one of them. Wan Hongling jumped up and was about to rush out of the door. She said, no, I have to tell Li Yundong immediately. Although this guy is a bit of a bastard, he is still a good person. If second Shirbwa suddenly attacks him, it is very likely that his body and soul will be destroyed. Zi Yuan grabbed her and shouted in a low voice, stop, don't go. Wan Hongling turned around and widened her eyes. Why? Sister Zi Yuan. Zi Yuan said in a deep voice, Li Yundong has a pure heart and is easygoing. He is not a shrewd person. Once he knows that second Shirbwa is hiding around the Fox Zen school, he will definitely reveal it in his usual words and expressions. With second Shirbwa's sensitivity, she will definitely notice it immediately and escape without hesitation. At that time, it will be really difficult for us to find her again. Wan Hongling said anxiously, but aren't you afraid that something will happen to Li Yundong? Aren't you the most worried about him? Zi Yuan looked at her strangely. It seems that you are the one who is more anxious now, aren't you? Wan Hongling stamped her feet and said, I'm really not worried, but the eunuch is. Good intentions are treated as ill intentions. Zi Yuan smiled slightly, and there was a hint of appreciation in her eyes. She said, don't worry. I used words to provoke Li Yundong before. As a result, the next day, I saw black qi in his left nose and red qi in his right nose. This is clearly the appearance of the highest realm of the 8 turns of fire creation. Wan Hongling couldn't help but be shocked. That's impossible. He can cultivate to the highest realm of the 8 turns of fire creation in one night. Then he is only 1 step away from the 9 turns. Zi Yuan also sighed and said, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. How could a person's cultivation be so fast? Wan Hongling shook her head and said, it's too scary. Last time on the rooftop, I saw him dance the fan of 7 treasures freely in one night, as if he had practiced it for several lifetimes. Zi Yuan said, so, you don't have to worry about Li Yundong. He is now in the pure Yuanying phase. In terms of cultivation and kung fu, he is only above second Shirbwa, not below her. If it's a fair fight, maybe he doesn't know as much as second Shirbwa, and he's not as skilled as her, but if second Shirbwa wants to sneak attack him, then it's another matter. With Li Yundong's current realm, if anyone with a lower cultivation than him wants to sneak up on him, his divine mind can predict the future. Since I can see through Li Yundong's cultivation, I believe second Shirbwa can also see through it, so she won't take the risk to sneak up on Li Yundong. Moreover, since she took such a big risk to sneak back, she must have some amazing plot. Now that we have found her, the enemy is in the light and we are in the dark. The situation is in our favor. If she finds out, it won't be good. Wan Hongling thought for a moment and said, what if second Shirbwa attacks the other people of the Fox Zen school? Zi Yuan smiled and said, that won't happen. Before second Shirbwa achieves her goal, she definitely won't act rashly and alert the enemy. With her personality, she won't show her dagger if she doesn't have the confidence to win. As she spoke, Zi Yuan's voice suddenly became cold. I really don't know what second Shirbwa is up to. Wan Hongling suddenly understood, but she quickly frowned and said, if second Shirbwa takes the Lyoha, it's impossible for her to keep it with her. Where would she hide it? Moreover, why doesn't she combine the Lyoha and Bahuang? With the Bahuang and Lyoha in hand, who in the world will she be afraid of? Zi Yuan smiled and said, I also thought of this before, but you have to know that Ao Wushuang was sealed in the Emperor's clock by second Shirbwa. Do you know what kind of powerful magical weapon it is? Wan Hongling nodded and said, of course I know. This is a powerful magical weapon of Yi fashion of the Tang dynasty. It can seal any master below the immortal level, including Jinshen and Thunder Retribution masters. Zi Yuan nodded and said, yes, the Emperor's clock is very domineering, but it also has one of its biggest shortcomings, that is, once it is sealed, it is difficult to release it again. Therefore, although Ao Wushuang was sealed by second Shibua, in fact, Ao Wushuang has become the safest person in the world, because second Shibua can't break the Emperor's clock to release Ao Wushuang, and she can't get the Bahuang sword beside Ao Wushuang. Wan Hongling sighed and said, "This is called being too clever and making a fool of yourself. So what should we do now? Now the Jingyi school is aggressive, and second Shibua is lurking around us. We have just started our business, and our livelihood is a problem. There are so many problems. What should we do?" Zi Yuan said lightly, "If he is strong, let him be strong. If he is tyrannical, let him be tyrannical. If he is tyrannical, let him be tyrannical. We just need to wait and see who will show their fox tail in the end." In the end, Zi Yuan suddenly sighed and said, "I hope our guess is wrong. Otherwise, the grudge between second Shibua and the Fox Zen school will really be impossible to resolve." When Zi Yuan mentioned the grudge between Yan Fong and the Fox Zen school, Wan Hongling suddenly sighed and said faintly, "Sister Zi Yuan, when the time comes, if second Shibua really wants to fight to the death with Li Yundong, which side will you help?" Chapter 362. Go to Watch Network. Zi Yuan was stumped by this question. Although she had long expected that she might face this day in the future, she had been subconsciously avoiding this question, because even she did not know how to face it. Watch Net. On one side was the second Shibua of her sect. Although Hongling had not received much care from second Shibua, she had received a lot of guidance from second Shibua in cultivation when she was a child. It could be said that she owed him a debt of gratitude. Moreover, even if second Shibua had not given her any guidance, he was still her Shibua in terms of seniority. In terms of distance, he was much closer to her than Li Yundong, an outsider. However, although the other side was a person who had nothing to do with her in theory, her master's psalm had connected her fate with him. After getting along with him for so many days, even if there was no true love, there was still a trace of affection. If she watched him fight with second Shibua, or if he died at the hands of second Shibua one day, what should she do? For a moment, Zi Yuan couldn't help but be a little dazed. Wan Hongling saw that Zi Yuan was in a daze, and her eyebrows were full of worry, as if thousands of worries were entangled together, turning into a mess that could not be untied. Wan Hongling let out a long sigh and said, "Alas, on one side is my second Shibua, and on the other side is my lover. What should I do?" Zi Yuan was a little confused and couldn't help murmuring, "Yes, what should I do?" Wan Hongling laughed and clapped her hands. "Sister Zi Yuan, you finally admitted that you fell in love with this guy." Only then did Zi Yuan wake up as if from a dream. She blushed and glared at Wan Hongling with shame and anger. "What did you say?" Wan Hongling giggled and said, "Sister Zi Yuan, don't deny it. Your subconscious has already answered for you just now. You can't deny it." Zi Yuan said angrily, "Hongling, you're getting more and more outrageous. If you keep talking, I'll drive you back to the mountain." Wan Hongling was startled. She quickly pulled Zi Yuan's arm and said coquettishly, "Sister Zi Yuan, now that our sect has been sealed, you want me to go back? Do you have the heart to let me be bullied alone?" Zi Yuan rolled her eyes at Wan Hongling. "If you don't want to be bullied, behave yourself." After she finished speaking, she also sighed and said, "Now the Jingyi sect is very powerful. They are pressing forward step by step in the light, and second Shibua is like a ghost, making arrangements everywhere in the dark. I feel that we are trapped both internally and externally, making it hard for us to eat and sleep in peace. I'm not worried about what the Jingyi school and second Shibua will do to us, but Li Jiandong. Maybe it's time to teach him some powerful magic." Wan Hongling was slightly surprised. "Sister Zi Yuan, what are you going to teach him?" Zi Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Back then, I asked him what kind of magic he wanted to learn among the 5 elements of the Great Way. He answered me that thunder magic was the strongest in the world. If he wanted to learn it, he would learn the strongest thunder magic. Back then, I didn't dare to teach him when I saw that his cultivation wasn't high enough. But now that his cultivation is high enough, it's time to teach him. One Hongling let out a cry of dissatisfaction and said, Sister Zi Yuan, I begged you many times, but you refused to teach me. Now you are actually taking the initiative to teach this guy. You are so biased. Zi Yuan glared at Wan Hongling and said, your cultivation is not high enough. You can't cultivate yang qi from yin qi. How can you practice thunder magic? First, practice the ordinary 5 elements Taoism. Nuclear weapons can kill people, and so can bullets. Cultivators should not be too ambitious. Oh, I know. Wan Hongling pouted and didn't say anything, but she thought to herself, Sister Zi Yuan, although you don't admit it, and you don't want to admit it in your heart, I still feel that you have fallen in love with Li Yundong. When the day comes when you finally have to admit it, you will find that this guy doesn't love you, but that fox spirit. Let's see what you will do then. While Wan Hongling and Zi Yuan were talking privately in the room, Li Jiandong was tasting the 4 famous dishes made by Su Chan Chao Yi, and the others of the Fox Zen school did not join in the fun and returned to their own rooms. Seeing that there was no one around, Su Chan blinked her eyes and looked at Li Jiandong, who was slowly tasting the 4 famous dishes. Li Yundong had a serious look on his face as he chewed slowly and repeatedly. He glanced at Su Chan and saw that the little girl was deliberately pretending to be a reserved lady, sitting upright in front of the table, but her eyes betrayed her heart. The little girl looked at Li Jiandong eagerly, her eyes full of joy and expectation. It was as if she was saying, is it delicious? Is it delicious? Li Jiandong laughed in his heart. He deliberately ate slowly for a long time, nodding as he ate, as if he was tasting the delicious food in the world. The more he ate, the more he enjoyed it and the happier he was. Seeing that Li Jiandong was eating so happily, the little girl couldn't hold back anymore. The corners of her mouth couldn't help curling up, and her eyes curved into crescent moons. She kept winking at Li Jiandong, as if to say, come and praise me, come and praise me. Li Jiandong shook his head, his face full of admiration. He nodded and said, did you really make these? Su Chan finally couldn't help but smile, revealing a row of snow-white teeth. She nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Yes. I made them. How is it? Is it delicious? Li Jiandong was not in a hurry to tell her. He slowly wiped his mouth, just like a slow-motion scene in a movie, as if he was deliberately teasing Su Chan. The little girl's heart was burning with anxiety. She couldn't help but rush over to Li Jiandong, grab his shoulders with both hands, shake him hard, and ask eagerly, how is it? Tell me quickly. Li Jiandong tried hard to hold back his laughter. His face became more and more serious, and his eyes showed surprise. He sighed softly and said, I didn't expect it to be made by you. Su Chan beamed with joy. Is it really that delicious? Is it really that delicious? Li Jiandong nodded hard. It's true. Su Chan suddenly jumped up, clapped her hands, and laughed proudly. But before she could finish laughing, she saw Li Jiandong gasping and saying, it's really. It tastes terrible. The smile on Su Chan's face suddenly collapsed. She flew into a rage out of shame and pounced on Li Jiandong, scratching and biting him. How dare you lie to me? Li Yundong burst out laughing. He held Su Chan in his arms, pinched her cheek lovingly, and said with a smile, you put too much salt in it. We cultivators should eat light food. Do you want to break my cultivation by putting so much salt? Su Chan burst into laughter and said, is it so easy to break the cultivation of a dignified leader? Li Yundong said to Su Chan with a smirk, with you here, my cultivation will be broken by you easily, won't it? Su Chan's cheeks turned slightly red. She giggled and said proudly, it turns out that the nemesis of the famous Shinran Li is me. Humph, let's see if you dare to bully me again. Be careful, or I'll break your cultivation. Li Jiandong put his arms around Su Chan's slim waist, pinched the tip of her nose, and said with a low, evil smile, "You little fox spirit, if you want to break my cultivation, I'll break your body first." Su Chan immediately jumped up and ran away with a startled smile. She ran to her door like a little rabbit, then poked her head out and looked at Li Jiandong timidly. Then, she giggled and said, "Big bad guy, you just want to do bad things." Li Jiandong laughed and said, "A bad guy who doesn't want to do bad things is not a good bad guy." Su Chan giggled, made a face at Li Jiandong, and then hid in the room. In the evening, everyone in the Fox Zen school began to cultivate. After reading hard for a while, Zhou Qin also fell asleep. Li Jiandong was still cultivating in his spirit space. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly heard a faint voice calling his name slowly and softly. Li Jiandong's heart skipped a beat. Soon, his young spirit came out of his body and he came to the roof outside the room. He saw that Zi Yuan had also come out of her body. She was dressed in white and was looking at him. Although there was a smile on her face, there was a very complicated look in her eyes. Li Jiandong smiled and said, "Are you calling me?" Zi Yuan nodded slightly. "Yes." Li Jiandong felt strange in his heart. "If you have something to do, you can come to me directly. Why did you call me by using your young spirit?" Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, "Because if I look for you directly, I will definitely alarm others. Today, I will give you the last lesson. This lesson is about the secret method of our Jinyi school that is not taught to outsiders. As the saying goes, the law cannot be spread to 6 ears. Only when you are in the state of yang spirit can you float in the air without consuming too much spiritual energy and jinqi. No one can hide in the air, so naturally, no one can hear what we say." Li Jiandong's expression turned serious. "Why, are you leaving? Why do you say it's the last lesson?" Zi Yuan laughed and said, "You think too much. The reason why I said it's the last lesson is that your cultivation has surpassed mine. The only thing I can teach you is some small Taoist magic. Once you learn these, I will have nothing else to teach you. From now on, you'll be able to defeat me in every aspect. The next time we fight, you'll really have to go easy on me." Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed in his heart. He respectfully cupped his hands and saluted Zi Yuan. "Zhenren Zi Yuan, you taught me the kung fu of cultivation and led me into the world of cultivation. Half of my Shintong kung fu was taught by you. In my heart, I regard you as my teacher and friend. I, Li Jiandong, dare to be disrespectful to everyone in the world, but I don't dare to be disrespectful to you in the slightest, let alone attack you." Zi Yuan was originally beautiful. At this time, standing under the bright moonlight, her hair was even more misty, and her figure was as ethereal as a fairy. When she smiled slightly, it seemed that the surroundings had brightened up. Zi Yuan said softly, "You don't have to be like this. This is your good fortune and also my cultivation. After you learn the Taoist magic, if you can punish evil, promote good, and promote righteousness, it will also be a blessing for our cultivation world, and also a blessing for our generation." Li Jiandong respectfully bowed again and said, "I will definitely remember your words, but I wonder what kind of Taoist magic you are going to teach me today." Zi Yuan said word by word in an extremely solemn tone, "Today, I will teach you the 5 thunders righteous magic." Chapter 363. Go to watch net. When Li Yundong heard that Zi Yuan was going to teach him the 5 thunders execution, he immediately became excited. His desire for cultivation was to defeat the power of heaven and transcend heaven and earth, so as to protect himself, Su Chan, and the people around him from being harmed by these forces. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. And the power of thunder was the power of heaven. Mastering the power of thunder and lightning was equivalent to mastering the strongest power in the world. Li Yundong was overjoyed and said, "Do you know the five thunders execution?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "I don't know, but I know how to cultivate." Li Yundong laughed and said, "It seems that you are also a genius with an eidetic memory. Could it be that you have memorized all the ancient books you read before?" Zi Yuan chuckled and said, "I remember all of them, but it's been many years. Now, I can't guarantee that they're right. And when it comes to cultivation, if there's a wrong word in the cultivation method, the result will be very different. Do you know the origin of the Fox Zen school?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I'm ashamed. As the leader of the Fox Zen school, I don't know the origin of the Fox Zen school. Please enlighten me, Jinren Zi Yuan." Zi Yuan couldn't help but tease him. "You, an outsider, have become the leader of the Fox Zen school, but you want me, an outsider, to tell you the origin of the Fox Zen school. Don't you think it's ridiculous?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's ridiculous. It's a matter of course. As the saying goes, a negative is a positive." After that, the two of them looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Zi Yuan pursed her lips and said with a smile, "During the reign of Emperor Xianzong of the Tang dynasty, Zen Master Baizhang of Buddhism would give a lecture. Every time after the lecture, an old man would stay. Zen Master Baizhang would ask who the old man was. The old man replied, 'I lived on this mountain 500 years ago.' A scholar asked, 'Do great cultivators still have karma?' I said, 'No karma. As a result, I fell into the body of a wild fox. Today, please tell me.' Zen Master Baizhang said, 'Please say it.' The old man asked again, 'Do great cultivators still have karma?' Zen Master Baizhang said, 'No karma.' From then on, the old man was enlightened. He said, 'I have already left the body of a wild fox. I am at the back of the mountain. Please treat me with the courtesy of a dead monk.' The next day, Zen Master Baizhang ordered his disciples to search all over the mountain. They found the body of a black fox on a large rock behind the mountain. After the abstinence, they cremated it. When Li Yundong heard this, he suddenly understood. "Ah, Su Chan mentioned some of the origins of the rock fox to me before, but she didn't say anything in detail. When she was in the hospital, she also said something about not falling into karma and not being ignorant of karma. At that time, I thought she was particularly touched, but it turned out that there was a story behind it." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Yes, there is only one word difference between not falling karma and not concealing karma, but the truth is completely opposite. No karma meant that everyone could do whatever they wanted without fear of the karma of heaven and earth. This was because they believed that they could escape the cycle of karma and reincarnation with their own strength. But not being ignorant of karma is the opposite. It says that no matter how powerful a cultivator is, it is impossible to escape karma. Even Bodhisattva must be in awe of this. The former is a fallacious theory, so the rock fox was punished from a monk to a wild fox for 500 years. The latter is the truth of the world. Once he had an epiphany, he immediately became an immortal from a wild fox. From this, it can be seen how huge the difference of one word is." Li Yundong clapped his hands and sighed. "You're right. However, I didn't know until today that the rock fox used to be a monk. No wonder his fan of 7 treasures is engraved with the runes of the Vajra Sutra. This powerful magical weapon is full of the majestic and brilliant Buddhist Vajra power." Zi Yuan said, "That's right." After the rock fox got rid of himself, he sighed with emotion about the 500 years he had spent in the Devil's Barrier. He didn't want the cultivators in the world who had fallen into the Devil's Barrier like him to continue to be trapped, so he created the Fox Zen School. At first, he accepted disciples from all over the world, not just the fox spirits. But gradually, the fox spirits gained absolute control of the Fox Zen School, especially in the hands of the 4th-generation sect master, the mystical Silver Fox. The Fox Zen school has completely become a sect of fox spirits, and the Fox Zen school has since become synonymous with fox spirits. Li Yundong said, I understand what you're saying, but what does it have to do with learning the Five Thunders righteous method? Zi Yuan smiled and said, what I want to say is that the art of cultivation must be practiced according to the classics. Don't easily believe the words of others. Otherwise, once you are framed, you will fall into the devil's barrier and can't get rid of it for hundreds of years. Li Yundong laughed and said, I believe you won't harm me. Why worry so much? Zi Yuan shook her head and said, you believe me, but I don't believe myself. If I say one wrong word, you will be doomed eternally. Today, I will only teach you the basic skills of the Five Thunders righteous method. Tomorrow, you will go back to the Lingong sect with me. I will go to the Sutras Pavilion of Master. I remember that he once collected a unique skill of the Shinshao sect, the Five Thunders Jade Book. You can read it and study it in depth. Li Yundong asked curiously, hasn't the Lingong sect been sealed? How can we go back? Zi Yuan smiled slightly. She looked up at the vast sky and said, God doesn't allow us to cultivate, but aren't we still going against the will of heaven? They can seal the Lingong sect, but they can't seal our legs. Li Yundong laughed and said, well said. Tomorrow, we will go to the Lingong sect at night. However, tonight, please tell me how to cultivate the Five Thunders righteous method first. Zi Yuan taught Li Yundong the Five Thunders cultivation method late at night. She patiently explained the theory and cultivation methods to Li Yundong. It was not until the sky was a little bright that the two of them left. They made an appointment to go to the Lingong sect in Mount Longhu the next night. In the morning, Zhou Qin and Wan Hongling still came to ask Li Yundong to go to class. Although these two girls were proud and conceited, their temperaments were somewhat similar and they got along very well, so they soon became good friends. When Li Yundong saw the two of them, he quickly waved his hand and shook his head, saying, no, I won't go. You can ask for a leave of absence for me. If it doesn't work, you can arrange for a temporary suspension or suspension of school. I can't go to school anymore. Don't you think it's not enough trouble? Zhou Qin looked disappointed. She was a little unwilling and asked again, then what are you going to do if you don't go to school? Li Yundong smiled and said, of course I'm going to take a look at the shop. I don't feel at ease if I don't go there for a day. Zhou Qin thought for a moment and said, then I'll go with you. I can also help by the way. Wan Hongling stamped her feet and said angrily, Zhou Qin, you are so disloyal. You promised to go to class with me, but now you go back on your word and stand me up. Zhou Qin smiled and said, of course I'm going with master. Hongling, I'm sorry. I'll treat you to dinner another day. Wan Hongling was so angry that she tilted her head and said, humph, I don't care. As she said this, she angrily said to Li Yundong, I won't ask for a leave of absence for you. If you want to ask for a leave, you can find someone to ask for it yourself. After that, she turned around and left, her ponytail swaying behind her head in a very unique way. Li Yundong looked at her leaving figure and laughed. This guy really has a fiery temper. She'll explode at the slightest provocation. As he said this, he looked up at Zhou Qin and said, it's good if you come with me today. We can discuss the renovation. By the way, if you have anything you don't understand about cultivation on the way, you can also ask me. I'll also help you answer them. I've been too busy recently and have neglected and alienated you. Please don't take it to heart. When Zhou Qin heard this, she felt warm in her heart. She smiled slightly, and her smile was as sweet as honey. She whispered, as long as I'm by your side, even if you don't talk to me all the time and ignore me all the time, I don't care. When Li Yundong saw her smile, which was like 100 flowers blooming at the same time, his heart suddenly thumped. He quickly withdrew his gaze and didn't dare to answer her again. Li Yundong coughed dryly and changed the topic. Then let's go out now. By the way, call Zi Yuan. Seeing that Li Yundong didn't reply to her, Zhou Qin's eyes flickered and she didn't force him. She responded softly, but just as she was about to turn around and leave, she asked again, by the way, do you want to call Su Chan? Li Yundong was about to speak, but suddenly he felt the sound of footsteps approaching gently. His heart skipped a beat, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He deliberately said loudly, no, this girl only knows how to cause me trouble. If I call her, maybe she will cause me some trouble again. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Su Chan jump out of the door with her hands on her hips. She said unhappily, well, as soon as I came, I heard you talking bad about me behind my back. You're so annoying. How did I cause you any trouble? You obviously despise me. After that, she covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Seeing that the little girl was crying, Li Yundong hurried forward, but when he took a closer look, he saw that although the little girl was covering her face with her hands, a pair of eyes peeking out from between her fingers were rolling around, looking at him slyly. As soon as the little girl's crafty and quick-witted eyes saw him, she immediately dodged in panic. Then, she closed her fingers again and clenched them tightly. She cried loudly, but after crying for a while, it was all thunder and no rain. Now Li Yundong understood that the little girl was acting coquettishly in front of him. Li Yundong held back his laughter and put on a look as if he wanted to watch the show. He looked at the little girl with interest, but didn't comfort her. Seeing that Li Yundong wasn't moving, she couldn't help but sneak a peek at him through the gaps between her fingers. This time, she saw that Li Yundong was watching a good show. Su Chan immediately became unhappy. She put down her hand, pouted, and stomped her feet. Why didn't you come and talk me out of it, she said. Why didn't you come and persuade me? Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. Persuade you about what? Su Chan pouted and said with a resentful face, you only know how to bully me. You're so annoying. As she said this, she looked at Zhou Qin, took her hand, and said coquettishly, Sister Zhou Qin, look, this person is so annoying. Not only did he talk behind my back, but he also deliberately angered me. Zhou Qin saw that Su Chan was charming and cute. Although she was sometimes jealous of her, she couldn't hate her in her heart. She smiled and said, Master, he's just playing with you. Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong, then put on a posture of continuing to act coquettishly and threatened, will you take me out or not? Seeing her posture, Li Yundong had no choice but to raise his hands high and say with a smile, how dare I not? Come on, Empress Dowager, I'll take you out of the palace. Su Chan immediately beamed with joy. She ran over to Li Yundong, put on a show, and then said in a drawling voice, let's go. Li Yundong quickly got into the mood. With a wretched and humble look, he carefully held Su Chan's white wrist and then led her out of the room. Because Li Yundong lived on the second floor, the little foxes downstairs had long heard the noise of them making. As soon as they went out, Li Yundong found that the little foxes were craning their heads downstairs and staring at him. Li Yundong suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. He thought to himself, oh my God, with so many pairs of eyes looking at me, it's okay if I don't have a strong husband, but I still need the prestige of the leader. If these little foxes also make trouble, how can I live? Li Yundong immediately had an idea. He nodded and bowed to Su Chan, who was beside him, and said, Empress Dowager, please close your eyes. I'll take you to a good place. Su Chan didn't doubt him. She closed her eyes and said with a smile, little Li, where are you taking me? When Li Yundong heard this, he was immediately amused. He thought to himself, oh, little girl, you're really taking advantage of me. Li Yundong tried hard to hold back his laughter and said, Empress Dowager, don't worry. I'll take you out of the palace now. As he said this, he turned around and took Su Chan into the bathroom. Then, he quickly turned around and ran out, locking the door behind him. Only then did Su Chan come to her senses. She opened her eyes, rushed to the door, and said in surprise, "Why did you lock me in?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Aren't you going to go to the palace?" "I'm taking you to the palace, aren't I?" Only then did Su Chan realize that she had been tricked by Li Yundong. She stamped her feet and shouted, "You're so annoying. I'm not going to the palace. I'm going out of the palace." At this time, the little foxes downstairs were all laughing so hard that they looked like gourds covering their mouths. Li Yundong stood on the stairs and glared at them. "You're still laughing. Do you also want to go to the palace? Shall I send you all out later?" The little foxes quickly jumped up one by one and ran into their rooms while giggling. Li Yundong turned his head and looked at Zhou Qin. He saw that the girl, who was usually serious, was laughing so hard that she was bending over. He quickly winked at her and said, "Idiot, why are you still standing there? If you don't run now, when will you?" Chapter 364. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong ran out with Zhou Qin and happened to meet Zi Yuan coming out from the opposite door. Li Yundong was amused and said with a smile, "Oh, what a coincidence. Are you also going out of the palace?" Zhou Qin was holding back her laughter. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she couldn't help laughing again. Go to the Kanban network. Li Yundong turned his head and glared at Zhou Qin, pretending to be angry. Be serious. We are about to leave the palace. Zhou Qin pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Which palace are you going out of? Is it the gong or the gong?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. Whichever you want. As soon as they stopped at the door, the girl called for someone to open the door and ran out. She jumped on Li Yundong's back like a gust of wind, hugging him like an octopus, scratching and biting. "You're so annoying. How dare you play with me?" Li Yundong turned his head and laughed at Su Chan. "Oh, are you done with the gong?" Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong and said, "You're so annoying. You stink." The three of them laughed and played. Zi Yuan looked at them in confusion and asked in confusion, What are you doing? What do you mean by going out of the palace? Who's going out of the palace?" Su Chan and Zhou Qin pointed at Li Yundong at the same time. He wants to go out." Li Yundong quickly waved his hand and said with a smile, No, I won't go out. If I want to go out, everyone will go out together." Zhou Qin and Su Chan spat at the same time and scolded with a smile, "It stinks." Li Yundong laughed and waved his hand. F***ck, I'm going out of the palace with 3 great beauties today. Su Chan bit Li Yundong's ear and giggled. "Who wants to go with you? You're so shameless." Zhou Qin also covered her mouth and laughed. "If you want to go out, you can go by yourself. I don't go out with men." At this time, Zi Yuan understood a little. She looked at Li Yundong helplessly, shook her head, and sighed. "Alas, you're already the leader of a sect. Why do you like to play so much? You're like a child." Li Yundong didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled cheekily and said to Zi Yuan, "Your Majesty, I'm going out of the palace with the 2 concubines. Would you like to come with us?" Seeing his shameless appearance, Zi Yuan couldn't help laughing. "I'm going to the store." "Where are you going?" Li Yundong was overjoyed and said with a smile, "We are also going to the store." "I was about to call you. Let's go together." The 3 of them chatted and laughed as they left. In the room, Chao Yi, Zhuang Yiting, and Lu Yuehong stood at the door and looked at their backs. Chao Yi put her palms together and said, "Ever since Leader came to our Fox Zen school, our lives have been full of laughter. I really hope that this kind of life can continue forever. It would be a great blessing for our Fox Zen school." Lu Yuehong also nodded and sighed, yes, hearing the laughter of the younger generation, I feel much better. If only Zhang Sun Hong was still here. Zhuang Yiting was a little silent. She silently watched Li Yundong and the others leave and said, let's go. We also have to speed up our cultivation. Li Yundong, Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin came to the pedestrian street and went straight to the shop. Before they reached the shop, they saw several craftsmen holding a design drawing outside the shop, pointing at it and talking about it. Li Yundong asked curiously, who are these people? Zhou Qin smiled and said, oh, they should be the decoration workers I contacted. Li Yundong was even more surprised. You contacted the decoration workers? Could they be holding a design drawing in their hands? Zhou Qin smiled and said, of course. Li Yundong was surprised and delighted. What kind of decoration company is so powerful that they actually made the design drawing in a day or two? This is simply the Ultraman of the decoration industry. Zhou Qin looked at Zi Yuan and said with admiration, this design was made by Zi Yuan after working overtime. If you want to thank someone, thank her. Li Yundong was shocked and turned to look at Zi Yuan. He sighed in surprise and said, is there anything in this world that you can't do? Zi Yuan said faintly, it's just a small trick. It's not worth mentioning. Li Yundong smiled and said, if your words were heard by the interior designers, I'm afraid they would die of depression. Let's go and see Zi Yuan's masterpiece. When the group of people walked to the door of the store, a man in a jacket saw Zhou Qin at a glance and came up to greet her warmly. Miss Zhou, we meet again. Zhou Qin smiled and went up to him. Mr. Han, are you personally leading the team? Why are you giving me face? Li Yundong saw that the man called Mr. Han was a middle-aged man in his 40s with a slight beard on his face. His appearance was average, but his eyes were quite bright and sleek. While Li Yundong was looking at him, Mr. Han also glanced at Li Yundong and quickly looked at Li Yundong. Obviously, he had been in the business world for a long time and had developed a pair of sharp eyes. Mr. Han glanced at Li Yundong. Although the man had a peaceful smile on his face, there was an air of arrogance and aloofness in his imposing manner. Mr. Han suddenly felt a chill in his heart and thought to himself, which family's son is this? I, Han Yongchang, have seen countless people, but I've never seen such an extraordinary young man. Mr. Han's gaze followed Li Yundong's back and fell on Zi Yuan. With just one glance, his mind buzzed. He felt that there was a fairy standing in front of him. She was so beautiful that he didn't dare to look at her. It was as if looking at her would be blaspheming the most beautiful fairy in the world. Mr. Han's eyes followed Li Yundong's back and fell on Zi Yuan. President Han quickly moved his gaze away and glanced at Su Chan again. As soon as he saw her, he felt his heart beating wildly. His eyes were fixed on Su Chan, and he couldn't move his eyes away anymore. He shouted in his heart, how could there be such a charming, and soul-stirring woman in this world? Li Yundong saw that he was staring at Su Chan in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. The eyes of the two young men behind him almost fell out of their sockets. They stared at Su Chan as if they wanted to swallow her whole. Li Yundong was a little displeased. He coughed dryly, which shocked Han Yongchang. He came back to his senses and smiled awkwardly at Zhou Qin and Li Yundong. The first thing he said was an authentic Beijing accent. Hey, everyone, I'm sorry. I lost my composure. Han Yongchang took the initiative to shake hands with Li Yundong. I haven't asked for your name yet. Li Yundong smiled and reached out to shake hands with him. My name is Li Yundong. Han Yongchang's face showed a thunderous expression. He was surprised and said, ah, nice to meet you. But in his heart, he thought, Li Yundong. I've never heard of this name. I've never heard of a family with the surname Li in Tiannan City. What's so great about that? Could it be that he's from another province? Li Yundong's name could be said to be famous in the cultivation world, but in the secular world, it was an ordinary name. Li Yundong was well aware of this. He didn't care about the other party's hypocritical politeness. He just smiled and said, "Mr. Han, you personally led the team to work so early. You're really considerate. On behalf of all the employees of Desanxian, I would like to express my gratitude to you." When Han Yongchang heard this, he asked curiously, "Desanxian? Is Childly going to open a restaurant?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "No, it's the Xian of Immortals." Han Yongchang was sure that Li Yundong was a spoiled brat with a great background. He made up his mind to curry favor with him, so he joked, "Desanxian. What a good name. Look at the three stunning beauties around Childly, aren't they the three fairies who descended to the earth?" When Li Yundong heard this, he was suddenly happy. He looked at Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin and saw that the three of them had different beauties, but they were all stunning beauties. It was a coincidence that the name Desanxian was used on the three of them. Li Yundong nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, I didn't expect that there would be such a saying about Desanxian. Interesting, very interesting." When Su Chan heard someone praise her as beautiful as a fairy, she was so happy that she beamed with joy. She held Li Yundong's arm and raised her head to act coquettishly at him. Zi Yuan smiled faintly and didn't comment. Zhou Qin smiled slightly, but thought to herself, Zi Yuan is a real fairy. Although Su Chan is a demon, with Li Yundong's help, she can also become an immortal in the future. But what about me? When can I cultivate to the real immortal realm? Li Yundong saw a hint of sadness in the corner of Zhou Qin's eyes, which quickly disappeared. He saw it in his eyes and remembered it in his heart, but he didn't say anything. Han Yongchang wanted to flatter Li Yundong, so he smiled at Zhou Qin and said, "Miss Zhou, this design of yours was designed by Childly, right? This design is of a very high standard. I've been in the decoration business for more than 10 years, and I've also been in the capital for several years. I've never seen such a simple and elegant design." Zhou Qin came to her senses and said with a smile, "You guessed wrong." Li Yundong also laughed and said, "Mr. Han, you're flattering me wrong. This design was not made by me. It was made by Zi Yuan." As he spoke, he pulled Zi Yuan to his side. Zi Yuan nodded slightly at Han Yongchang and didn't say anything. Han Yongchang's flattery had failed, but he was not embarrassed. He quickly reacted and said, "Oh, it turned out to be made by Miss Zi Yuan. This design is really wonderful. It's amazing. If you were to design, I'm afraid we would all be starving." His flattery made Li Yundong and the others laugh, and Zi Yuan also smiled slightly. Li Yundong said with a smile, "Don't be in a hurry to flatter us. Let's talk about the price first. No matter how much you flatter us, I won't pay you more. I'm a real poor man." Han Yongchang said with a smile on his face, "Childly, all of the beauties around you are rare in the world. It's a blessing for an ordinary man to find one of them. But you have 3 of them by your side. What's even rarer is that no matter which one of them is, they are all masters with unique skills. They are not comparable to those vases. If you say that you are a poor man, then I won't do it. Aren't you scolding me in a roundabout way?" Li Yundong asked curiously, "How did I scold you?" Han Yongchang said with a smile, "Think about it. If it were an ordinary person, would any of the fairies around you be able to follow him? What would they want from him? Could it be that they want a wife and children, a warm kong, and a daily necessities? Even if they get the design, they won't be able to keep it. Only someone as extraordinary as you can protect these 3 fairies and the shop of the Desanxian. In my opinion, just by looking at the 3 people around you, I can see that you are either rich or noble. You must be a great person." As he said this, he rolled up his sleeves and gave a thumbs up. Li Yundong laughed and said, "Your flattery makes me feel a little smug. Be careful not to flatter me too much. If I fall to my death, you won't get any money. There were many hidden meanings in Li Yundong's words. One of them was that he had acquiesced to the decoration cooperation with Han Yongchang. Han Yongchang was delighted and said, "That's impossible. With your physiognomy, not only will you live to 100 years old, but you will also have a brilliant career. In ancient times, you must be a talented general and minister. In modern times, you must be a business magnate." Li Yundong said with a smile, "Come on, don't flatter me. I still say the same thing. I'm actually a poor man. I really don't have much money. Anyway, I'll give you a price. If you think you can do it, you can do it. If you can't, I won't force you. It's useless for you to praise me. I can't make money. If I were really rich, would I be able to run such a small shop?" Han Yongchang also laughed and said sincerely, "Childly, since you said something reliable, I'll also say something reliable. I can see that you, Childly, have an extraordinary temperament. You must not be an ordinary person. Although you are trapped here at the moment, you will definitely spread your wings and soar in the future. As the saying goes, don't bully a poor young man. I, Han Yongchang, am not a person who is greedy for money. Today, I'll say it here. No matter how much you pay, I'll take this job." Li Yundong was overjoyed when he heard this. "Well, with your words, I'll make friends with you. However, don't skimp on the work." After that, he and Han Yongchang both laughed. Seeing that the two of them were talking happily, Zhou Qin smiled and said to Han Yongchang, "Mr. Han, let's talk inside. By the way, we can see how the design is going to work." Li Yundong smiled and said to Zhou Qin, "Take Zi Yuan and Mr. Han inside to have a look. I'll have a few words with Su Chan." Li Yundong waited for them to enter the shop, then he gently stroked Su Chan's soft black hair and said with emotion, "Just now, this man said, 'Don't bully a poor young man.' I suddenly remembered the days when the two of us were driven to the streets. Then I remembered that after I met you, I really didn't seem to let you live a really comfortable life. There were always all kinds of things that made you secretly worried. Sometimes, I would wonder what we would do if our shop didn't make any money. We will really have to beg for food. At that time, will I still be able to protect you, a fairy on earth?" Su Chan obediently held Li Yundong's arm and leaned against his side like a little bird. She looked at her lover in front of her with infatuation in her eyes and said softly, "Sir, I'm already very satisfied. I came through when I was at my poorest. In the future, it will definitely be better. And no matter how poor I am, as long as I don't die, I will eventually succeed. I believe that the man I like is a man of indomitable spirit. In the future, he will definitely be a great hero who can shake the world. How can this kind of daily necessities be difficult for him? Moreover, at that time, you will be so powerful. Will you still remember a little fox spirit like me?" Li Yundong sighed in his heart when he heard this. He suddenly remembered the conversation he had with Su Chan in the rental house and couldn't help but say, "As long as you don't leave me, I won't abandon you. The heavens and the earth can testify to this." "Are you stupid? Why did you suddenly say that? It's weird." Although Su Chan's mouth was angry, her heart was filled with sweetness. The little girl stretched out her hand and clasped her fingers tightly with Li Yundong's, as if she would never let go in 3 lifetimes. The two of them snuggled up tightly, as if they were going to merge into one. They stood on the street and looked at each other. For a moment, they seemed to be in a daze. Just as they were looking at each other in infatuation, suddenly, an extremely harsh voice came in. "Oh, it's you guys. You guys haven't broken up yet?" When Li Yundong heard this, anger rose from the bottom of his heart. Motherf asterisk cur. Who the hell dares to curse me and Su Chan, he thought. He turned his head and saw a fat middle-aged woman standing not far away, sizing them up. Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed out loud when he saw the woman. This woman was none other than the landlady who had driven them out of their rental house and forced them to live on the streets. Well, the asterisk is almost here. Chapter 365. Go to watch net. As soon as Li Yundong saw the landlady, he thought to himself, it can't be such a coincidence, can it? I was just thinking about how you drove us out before, and now you're here. Are you that amazing? Su Chan also widened her eyes. She pointed at the landlady and stammered, aren't you that? The landlady seemed to have been living a good life recently. Although she was fat, she was dressed in famous brand clothes. She also had big and small bags in her hands, and her face was ruddy. It was obvious that she had made a small fortune and was particularly proud. Go to watch net. She hadn't expected to meet her former tenant on the pedestrian street. For a moment, she couldn't help but sneer when she saw the couple being affectionate on the street as if there was no one else around. But who was Li Yundong? Li Yundong was not a person who liked to be at a disadvantage. His cultivation was extremely strong, and his eloquence was also very good. He immediately retorted sarcastically, so it's you. You're still alive. The landlady's face suddenly became very ugly. She had wanted to say something sarcastic to this annoying guy and then leave. She hadn't expected that Li Yundong's tongue would be as sharp as a knife. He didn't give her any face at all, which put her in a difficult position. The landlady thought to herself, wow, how dare you quarrel with me? Since I drove you away last time, I have been very lucky. It can be seen that you are a jinx. Now you are so depressed, but you still dare to challenge me. The landlady sneered and said, of course I'm alive, and I'm living a good life. As she said this, she made a coquettish pose and showed off her famous brands. She pointed to her bag and said, do you know what brand it is? Louis Vuitton, 1V. One bag costs tens of thousands. Do you dare to buy one for your own woman? You don't dare, do you? I dare to buy one for myself. Women should be more ruthless to themselves. As for you. By the way, didn't you say how great your man was? What about now? How is it? Su Chan was disgusted by the landlady who had driven them out of their comfort zone. She sneered and said, of course. You're so fat, so of course you have to be harder on yourself. You want to find a man who can buy you this bag, but can you find one? Su Chan's words hit the landlady's soft spot. She was so angry that her face turned pale and her lips trembled. She pointed at Su Chan and stuttered, you bitch. What did you just say? Besides seducing men, what else can you seduce? Li Yundong saw that the landlady was so angry that her eyes bulged. He laughed and said, I'm sorry, my little girl only knows how to seduce me, and I like being seduced by her very much. But I don't know who you want to seduce, landlady. Who would want to be seduced by you? The landlady was furious. She was so angry that she cursed, I used to be pretty, too. Why are you so smug about it? If you have the ability, you can still be as beautiful as you are now in 30 years. This sentence was exactly what Li Yundong and Su Chan were proud of. Ordinary people were afraid of aging, illness, and death, but cultivators were not. The two of them looked at each other and smiled knowingly. Li Yundong suddenly felt that it was really embarrassing for two cultivators to quarrel with such a shrew in the street. He smiled at Su Chan and said, forget it. Let's ignore her and go in. Seeing that the two of them were about to leave, the landlady thought that she had won, so she said proudly, humph, you can still be proud for 2 more years while you're still young. Li Yundong, let me tell you, don't think that you're young and handsome now. It's useless for a man to rely on his face. When the time comes, you'll be penniless. I want to see if you can protect the woman around you. Li Yundong turned his face and glanced at her sideways. He sneered and didn't answer her. Su Chan turned around and said seriously, "The man I like must be a great hero. No matter what he does, he will do it to the best of his ability. He was poor before, but it doesn't mean that he will be poor in the future." As she said this, Su Chan pointed to the shop behind her. "This is the shop that my Yundong bought. Yundong said that in the future, we will open 2, 3, or even more than a dozen shops like this and open them all over the world." After Su Chan said this, the landlady burst into laughter. Her laughter was full of disdain. She pointed at Li Yundong and Su Chan and said, "Just you two? You're talking in your sleep in broad daylight and yawning like a toad. What a big tone. I'm dying of laughter. Do you think that doing business is so simple? How dare you say such big words with such a small shop?" Su Chan's face turned red from her sarcasm. She said angrily, "Why do you look down on me?" The landlady snorted and sneered. "No reason. I just don't like you. How dare you say such arrogant words at such a young age? Who do you think you are?" Su Chan was so angry that she was about to speak, but Li Yundong suddenly raised his hand and stopped her. Li Yundong smiled and said to the landlady, "Do you dare to make a bet with me?" The landlady squinted at Li Yundong. "What bet?" Li Yundong smiled slightly, pointed to the shop behind him, and said, "I will open this shop all over the country within 3 years, and then all over the world. Do you dare to make a bet with me?" Seeing that Li Yundong was calm and composed, the landlady was secretly shocked. For the first time, she couldn't help but start to seriously look at the boy in front of her. In her eyes, this boy could not be compared to before, whether in appearance or temperament. In the past, when she had driven him out, this boy had been full of immaturity and inexperience. But now, his whole body was covered with a strong aura, like a green pine standing proudly in the sky, vigorous and powerful. His words revealed a sense of calmness and confidence. This was a kind of temperament that had been cultivated through countless storms, and it was not something that could be imitated. The landlady looked at Li Yundong doubtfully, and then looked at the shop behind him. She couldn't help asking, "What kind of shop are you running?" Although she didn't like Li Yundong and Su Chan, she was not stupid. She deliberately asked Li Yundong. If he opened an international chain store, then she would fall into his trap if she made a bet with him. Li Yundong smiled and was about to speak, but Su Chan rushed to say loudly, "Listen carefully. Our Yundong runs a tea shop called Desanxian." Tea shop. The landlady's hanging heart suddenly returned to her stomach. She asked with a strange expression, "Is it a tea shop or a tea shop?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "A tea shop." The landlady laughed out loud. "A tea shop wants to open all over the world. I'm dying of laughter. How is that possible?" Li Yundong asked, "Foreigners can open coffee shops in China. Why can't Chinese people open tea shops all over the world? China's tea culture has a long history, and it has a tradition of thousands of years. Tea is not only a beverage, but also can cure diseases and make people live longer. It's because no one has done this that I dare to say that I will succeed." The landlady was not willing to believe Li Yundong's big words. She sneered and said, "Well, I'll make a bet with you. Tell me, how do you want to bet?" Li Yundong chuckled. He stretched out 2 fingers and said lightly, "If I lose, I'll stab my own eyes. If you lose, you'll crawl back and forth on this street like a dog." When the landlady heard this, her face suddenly changed. She had never seen such a vicious bet before. Li Yundong's tone made it sound as if he was going to stab someone else's eye instead of his own. She thought to herself, "How dare this guy make such a bet? Is he bluffing? Yes, 3 years later, who knows whether this guy will be dead or alive? Maybe he will run away at that time. He won't remember this bet. It's just that he wants to vent his anger now." Well, he must be bluffing. The landlady made up her mind and said with a sneer, well, who will be a witness? As soon as she finished speaking, a voice immediately came from the side. I'll be a witness. Li Yundong and Su Chan turned their heads and looked in the direction of the voice. They saw Zhou Ping and Wang Lingfei of the Zhenyi school standing not far away and slowly walking over. Li Yundong frowned and thought to himself, why are these guys like ghosts? Why are they everywhere? Zhou Ping glanced at Li Yundong, then smiled at the landlady and said, I'll be a notary for you. Li Yundong looked at the two of them and sneered. Where's your fat shirdi? Zhou Ping's face changed. She said coldly, you don't have to worry about him. He's fine. The landlady looked at the two uninvited guests in confusion, then at Li Yundong. She asked suspiciously, do you know each other? Zhou Ping sneered and said, no, I just saw injustice on the road. Li Yundong retorted sarcastically, I think you're meddling in other people's business. The landlady hadn't expected that the matter between her and Li Yundong would change again, but she was happy to see Li Yundong suffer a setback. She clapped her hands and said, since there's a witness, it's easy. Li Yundong, remember what you said. 3 years later, Humph, I'll wait for you to stab your own eyes. As she spoke, she didn't want to get involved with these people, so she turned around and left. Su Chan was so angry that she shouted at her back, you must be the one crawling like a dog. My Yundong won't lose. Li Yundong smiled and touched the girl's head. Then, he put on a serious face and said to Zhou Ping and Wang Lingfei, do you have anything else to say? If there's nothing else, I won't keep you company. Surprisingly, Zhou Ping didn't make trouble. She smiled and said, genuinely, please go ahead. Li Yundong snorted and walked into the shop with the girl. As soon as the two of them entered, Su Chan took Li Yundong's arm worriedly and said, Yundong, will our shop make money? Li Yundong hugged her dotingly and said with a confident smile, don't worry, I have a way. Except for that time against your master, when have you ever seen me lose? Only then did Su Chan feel relieved. She giggled and put her arms around Li Yundong's strong waist, saying, of course, my Yundong is invincible in the world, even in business. Li Yundong laughed and said, you're bragging a little too much. At this time, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others were coming down from the second floor. Zi Yuan walked up to Li Yundong and looked at Zhou Ping and Wang Lingfei outside the shop. She asked in a low voice, what happened? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, it's nothing. I just drove away a fly. After that, he asked Zi Yuan in confusion, are these two guys targeting us now? Zi Yuan nodded slightly and said softly, if the Zhenyi school wants to annex the Linggong sect, they must first cut off our source of income, and then they can force us to give in. If they don't cut off our source of income, they won't be able to force us to compromise. So, Li Yundong, you must be mentally prepared. In the past, Zhou Ping could be said to be a battle of pride, but now, it is a cruel battle of interests. The battle of interests between sects is not as modest and plain as that between cultivators. It is full of bloody fighting. You must not be careless, or it will be a disaster. Li Yundong's face was solemn. He nodded and said, you're right. It can be seen from the fact that the major sects besiege the Fox Zen school. But don't worry, if they come in the open, I'm not afraid. But if they come in the dark, I don't believe that these tricks can win against us. As you once said, the real art of tea can't be framed by tricks. As he spoke, his eyes also followed Zi Yuan to look at Zhou Ping and Wang Lingfei, who were outside the door. Their eyes met through the glass, and countless sparks immediately arose. Wang Lingfei looked at Li Yundong and snorted coldly. He said to Zhou Ping unhappily, this guy looks really annoying. I only hate that my powerful magical weapon hasn't been refined yet. Zhou Ping smiled and said, to defeat a person, you don't necessarily have to fight. Since they want to do business, I will fulfill their wish. Do they think it is so easy to make money in business? Wang Lingfei said, do you have any good ideas? Zhou Ping snorted, and a trace of ferocity suddenly appeared on her face. Isn't it easy for our Jingyi school to cut off people's source of income? However, there is no need to do that now. I want him to open the shop, and then I will destroy it. I want them to be completely deserted. There will be no customers and they won't be able to make a penny. Let's go back first. My master still has to refine the two sword souls today. Chapter 366. Go to Watch Network. By the time Li Yundong and the others returned home, it was already evening. After dinner, everyone returned to their respective rooms to cultivate. Li Yundong waited until late at night, then flew to the roof. Go to the watch net. See. When he arrived at the roof, he saw that Zi Yuan was already waiting for him. Li Yundong smiled and said, "You're so early. I came a little earlier." Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, "Then should I be like Huang Shigong and ask you to go back first and come back another day?" Li Yundong knew that Zi Yuan was talking about an illusion. He quickly waved his hand and said with a smile, No, I'm not Zhang Liang, who saves the world, and you're not Huang Shigong, who appears and disappears mysteriously. You don't have to do this." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Let's go back to Mount Longhu." After that, her figure turned into a blue light and flew away like lightning. Li Yundong also flew behind her. The two of them flew extremely fast. Tiannan City was not far from Mount Longhu. After about 2 hours, the two of them arrived at Mount Longhu. Li Yundong said to Zi Yuan in mid-air, "This is the sphere of influence of the Jingyi school. Aren't you afraid of being discovered by them?" Zi Yuan chuckled and said, "Mount Longhu is very big. The sphere of influence of the Jingyi school has not expanded to the point where they would know if a person entered within 100 miles. Li Yundong laughed and said, "Then I overestimated them." However, Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "No. This is mainly because the power of the Jingyi school has declined greatly since the Ming and Qing dynasties. In the middle of the Ming dynasty, when the Jingyi school was at its peak, the Shangqing Palace of Mount Longhu was not only full of magic circles, but there was also an earth-shattering Sanju formation in the Taoist master's mansion. Even if an immortal entered, his body and soul would be destroyed and turned into powder. At that time, everyone within 100 miles was a cultivator. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they were all spies of the Jingyi school. Not to mention a person coming in, even if a fly flew in, the Jingyi school would know whether it was male or female. Li Yundong gasped. Was the Jingyi school so powerful at that time? Zi Yuan sighed and said, "Yes, the predecessor of the Jingyi school, Zhang Daoling, the leader of the 5 pecks of rice sect, achieved great success in cultivation and alchemy in Mount Longhu. Starting from Zhongsheng, the 4th generation of Taoist masters at the end of the Han dynasty, all the Taoist masters of the past generations lived here. They entrenched themselves in Mount Longhu in search of immortals and techniques, sat in the Shangqing Palace to teach and preach, and lived in the Taoist master's mansion to cultivate their moral character. Until today, they had inherited the orthodoxy for 63 generations, and they had guarded it for more than 1,800 years. Moreover, almost every generation of Taoist master had been worshipped and conferred titles by the feudal dynasties. In the history of our country, only one great aristocratic family can compare to it. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he blurted out, "Sage Confucius?" Zi Yuan nodded and said, "That's right. In the history of China's culture, there are only 2 great families that have been passed down from generation to generation. They are the South Zhang and the North Kong. The South has Taoist Master Zhang, and the North has Sage Confucius." Although there had been a lot of friction between Li Yundong and the Jingyi school, when he heard Zi Yuan's words, he immediately respected the history of the Zhengyi school and was in awe of it. He looked down in mid-air and looked at Mount Longhu with the help of the starlight and moonlight. Li Yundong saw that the peaks under his feet stretched for dozens of miles, and the mountain range stretched endlessly, like dozens of big dragons sleeping. The mountains were like dragons coiling and tigers crouching. The dragons and tigers were fighting for supremacy, not giving in. Between the mountains, a clear stream of water floated in from the east. It flowed slowly along the mountains, circling the peaks, as if taking a rest or admiring the scenery. The beach was white, and the pool was green. In this quiet forest, there were occasional bird chirps and animal cries. Occasionally, one could vaguely hear the soft and elegant voice of a Taoist priest chanting sutras. Li Yundong's eyes were clear and his spirit was refreshed. There seemed to be an infinite heroic feeling in his chest. He let out a long breath, and his breath was long and leisurely, as if he wanted to swallow dragons and tigers. The qi he had cultivated for a night was not even comparable to the qi of heaven and earth that had been nourished by looking at this magnificent river and mountain. It's really a paradise of immortals. Li Yundong sighed. Seeing that Li Yundong was lost in thought while looking at Mount Longhu, Zi Yuan said with a smile, "Now do you know why all the cultivation sects must be in the mountains? Don't be discouraged. When you earn enough money, Mount Tianlong will naturally return to your hands. At that time, you will also have your own cultivation house." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Thank you. Come on, let's go down." Zi Yuan flew down with Li Yundong. At this time, the two of them entered Mount Longhu. It was different from looking down from the sky before. Zi Yuan took Li Yundong all the way through the mountains, introducing him to the beautiful scenery of the mountains. Zi Yuan said, "There are 99 peaks and 24 rocks in Mount Longhu, all of which are taken from the softest streams around the mountain and the masculine of the 99 dragons. The mountain elixir is green and full of spirituality. When the Taoist master of every generation descends to the world, dragons and tigers will appear, and the sky will be covered with clouds." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I just don't know why the Zhengyi school has declined in such a treasured land." Zi Yuan sighed and said, "During the Republic of China, there was a war between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party and the war of resistance against Japan. Mount Longhu was also affected, and many Taoist schools were repeatedly destroyed. After the founding of the People's Republic, only the Gate Tower, the Wuchao Gate, the Bell Tower, the Dismount Pavilion, the Dongyin Courtyard, and other buildings remained in the huge Mount Longhu. During the 10 years of turmoil, these buildings were all destroyed, and not a single one was left. Back then, the cultivation sects of the Supreme Taoist Masters were like this. You can imagine what kind of impact the other sects suffered." As Zi Yuan spoke, she suddenly smiled and said, "Now that the country has reopened its control over the cultivation world, the Zhengyi school can't wait to restore its former glory. Therefore, the first thing they have to do is to gather the branch sects that were scattered in the past, gather all the forces that can be gathered, and then unify the cultivation world and be the only one in the world." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "So, they found you, and they bumped into me. So, we formed a feud with the Zhengyi school." Zi Yuan nodded slightly. The two of them walked like the wind. Not long after, they arrived at a side peak of Mount Longhu. Zi Yuan came to the door of the Taoist temple. She looked up and saw 2 dazzling seals pasted on the door. Zi Yuan smiled slightly and raised her hand. The seal moved without any wind, and before long, it fell to the ground. "Let's go to the Sutras Pavilion." Zi Yuan gently pushed the door open and said to Li Yundong in a soft voice. Li Yundong nodded and followed Zi Yuan inside. Along the way, Li Yundong saw that the Taoist temple was in a mess, as if the Red Guards had passed through. Zi Yuan said lightly, "Since the 10 years of turmoil, our Lingdong sect has never suffered such a catastrophe. I didn't expect that today's disaster would come from our own sect. What a pity." Li Yundong saw all this. He smiled and comforted her, "It doesn't matter. We will get these things back sooner or later." Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong, smiled noncommittally, and continued to lead the way. Li Yundong followed Zi Yuan through a cave residence and a lotus pond. Finally, they arrived in front of a stone cave. Zi Yuan turned to Li Yundong and said, "Wait here for a while." Li Yundong nodded. He saw that Zi Yuan was holding his sleeve with one hand, and the fingers of the other hand were flying on the smooth side of the wall, as if she was drawing some kind of talisman. After a while, a golden talisman appeared on the smooth side of the wall, and then it became brighter and brighter, and then disappeared. After a while, there was a cracking sound coming from inside the wall. Not long after, a groove frame protruded from the wall, and there was a jade plate on it. Zi Yuan reached out and took the jade plate down. After a while, the groove frame automatically retracted, and there was no sign of any mechanism on the wall. Li Yundong asked curiously, "So magical? Are all your things hidden in the wall?" Zi Yuan explained with a smile, "Every sect has its own treasure hiding place. The treasure of our Lingdong sect is hidden in the wall of the cave residence. There are invisible magic circles and talismans everywhere on the wall. If someone wants to force it open with external force, it will only cause all the collections inside to be destroyed. Only by knowing the correct way to open it can you take out what you want from it." Li Yundong smiled and said, "This is really magical." Zi Yuan solemnly handed the jade plate in her hand to Li Yundong, but when he reached out to take it, she shrank it back again and said with a serious expression, "Li Yundong, before you learn the thunder method, you must first promise me that you will never use this kind of magic to do evil things. Otherwise, even if God doesn't punish you, I will." Li Yundong's face was full of solemnity. He said word by word, "Don't worry, I, Li Yundong, will not do those evil things. If I violate you, I will be struck by lightning." A smile appeared on Zi Yuan's face. She gently placed the jade plate in Li Yundong's hand and said, "I believe in your character. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taught you the 5 Thunder Jade Book. I just taught you the 5 Thunder Jade Book according to the rules." Li Yundong took the jade plate in his hand. At a glance, he saw that the jade plate was emerald green. In the middle of the plate, there was a paragraph of text engraved with golden text. The text was dark green, and the edge of the jade plate was vermilion, like a formation. Li Yundong asked curiously, "Isn't it the 5 Thunder Jade Book? Why is it a jade plate?" Zi Yuan said with a smile, "Does it have to be made of paper to be called a book? This is a magical item passed down to me by my master. It is engraved with the 5 Thunder Righteous method of the Shinchao sect. I haven't learned it myself. You can take a look at it yourself. With your cultivation, you will get twice the result with half the effort." Li Yundong nodded in agreement. He looked down at the jade plate and saw a few big words written on the first line. It was, "Thunder is the cardinal of heaven and earth. Thunder is the command of heaven, and it has the greatest power. Everything in the 3 realms and 9 earths is under the control of thunder." Even though these words were small, they revealed a strand of powerful, vast, and imposing aura that caused one's mind to be refreshed. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong deeply and said meaningfully, "Li Yundong, from ancient times to the present, any cultivator who can cultivate the 5 Thunders method is a great cultivator who will leave his name in history. From now on, the magic you cultivate will be beyond the 5 elements and stand above all living beings. I'm going back to Shanghai this week. I'm really tired. I've been reading 3 times for 7 days in a row." Chapter 367. Go to Watch Network. Hearing Zi Yuan's words, Li Yundong's heart stirred, but he suppressed his excitement and asked, "Your cultivation is about the same as mine. Why can't you practice the 5 Thunders?" Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, because I am a woman with 5 punctures, and I am also a Xianin virgin. Li Yundong asked in confusion, what does this have to do with learning thunder magic? Isn't Ao Wushuang also a woman with no punctures? Why did I hear Su Chan say that she knows the 5 thunders? Zi Yuan explained with a smile, in fact, it's very simple. The ancients often said that thunder is the mother of lightning. From this word, it can be seen that only men can use thunder, and what we can drive is electricity. Go to 7 K.O.M. Li Yundong asked curiously, is there a difference between thunder and electricity? Zi Yuan chuckled and said, of course there is a difference. Electricity is a derivative of thunder, and thunder itself not only has the attribute of electricity, but also has an extremely strong destructive and explosive ability. Above the 5 thunders, there are 9 thunders and heavenly thunders. When heavenly thunders are raging, rivers and mountains will be blasted into pieces, but electricity does not have this power. In other words, if you want to drive thunder, you need extremely strong yang qi as a backing and support. I am a virgin, and the yuan-yang power in my body is only enough for me to cultivate the yang spirit, not enough to drive the 5 thunders. As for Ao Wushuang, she once had sex with my master. They exchanged yin and yang qi, so Ao Wushuang has extremely strong yuan-yang qi in her body. That's why she can use the 5 thunders, but I can't. Only then did Li Yundong understand. He nodded and blurted out, then if you find a man, you can also. After Li Yundong said this, he felt that it was inappropriate. At this time, Zi Yuan's face was already red, and she glared at him with shame and anger. She said angrily, I'm kind enough to teach you magic cultivation. How dare you make fun of me? Li Yundong was used to seeing Zi Yuan's calm and indifferent appearance, and he was already somewhat immune to her beauty. At this time, when he saw her embarrassed and angry, she actually increased her charm, especially when he looked at a beauty under the moonlight. For a moment, Li Yundong's heart couldn't help but thump wildly. He coughed awkwardly and smiled awkwardly. I just said it casually. Don't think too much about it. Zi Yuan felt that her cheeks and ears were burning. She glared at Li Yundong fiercely and said, hurry up and memorize all the above words. Go back and practice them slowly. Li Yundong laughed dryly and quickly lowered his head to look at the 5 thunders jade book in his hand. But after reading it for a while, Li Yundong only felt that his heart was in a mess. It was as if he could feel Zi Yuan's sharp and angry eyes staring at him. Li Yundong simply recited all the words on the 5 thunders jade book to calm his mind. He held the 5 thunders jade book in his hand and said, 1 Qi and spirit, returning to the root and returning to life. Walking, standing, sitting, and lying down are continuous. Therefore, the one who cultivates the noble spirit and applies it to the law is to use my true Qi and the creation of heaven and earth. Therefore, it can be called Qi and thunder. Li Yundong read for a while, and his mind gradually calmed down. Gradually, his heart and Qi became one, and he entered a state of forgetting himself and everything else. Every word he read was clearly printed in his mind. After he finished reading it, he sat cross-legged on the ground and fell into deep thought and meditation. Zi Yuan saw that he began to understand the Tao on the spot. Obviously, he had just read the sutra and understood something in his heart, so she consciously stood to the side to protect him. After reading these ancient books, Li Yundong had a preliminary understanding of the way of thunder and lightning in his heart. Not only was there the original text in the 5 thunders jade book, but there were also very small annotations in the gaps. One of the annotations was particularly clear to Li Yundong. On it was written, the cultivation of the thunder arts also paid special attention to the cultivation of the inner core, and advocated the Tao body dharma usage, which was to cultivate the inner core and the Tao as the foundation, and externally, to form all kinds of divine abilities and mysterious magical skills. Once the Niden is formed, the innate qi will be full. This innate qi is also known as the innate ancestral qi and the Hunyuan qi. Our Taoism says, one qi into three pure ones. This qi is the Hunyuan qi, and the Hunyuan qi is the Tao. Wang Shichen praised to Ba Duan Jin explained the thunder magic very clearly. With this qi, heaven and earth will change constantly. Man is the spirit of all things. With this qi, he can feel the heaven and earth, move ghosts and gods, breathe in wind, cloud, thunder, and rain, and go everywhere. And under this small annotation, it was written, if people can gather the qi of the five elements into the five thunders, then the thunder magic is the innate Tao, and the god of thunder is my god. From this, it could be seen that people could actually rely on the qi of the five elements to create their own thunder. There was no need to completely borrow the Hunyuan qi between heaven and earth. Thinking of this, Li Yundong gathered the qi of the five internal organs in his body into his dantian. He wanted to see what the thunder and lightning driven by the qi of the five elements looked like. With a thought, the qi of the five internal organs rushed out, like countless wild horses out of the gate, and rushed to the lower dantian in his lower abdomen. When ordinary cultivators practice qi, the qi of a certain visceral qi passed through the nidan and then quickly flowed away, forming a continuous qi like flowing water. Li Yundong transferred the qi of the five internal organs to the lower dantian in his lower abdomen. This time, the qi of the five elements in the five internal organs had no place to go. They all gathered together, and the qi of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth surged back and forth, shaking each other. Li Yundong suddenly felt that the lower dantian in his lower abdomen seemed to have turned into a big drum. There was a rumbling sound inside, as if thunder and lightning were brewing. An extremely powerful force was surging in his lower abdomen, with no place to vent. Li Yundong only brewed it for a while before he felt that the force was getting stronger and stronger. Gradually, he couldn't control it, and there was a faint pain in his lower abdomen. Li Yundong was secretly shocked. He knew that since he had reached the Zhuji phase, his body had been extremely strong, especially his internal organs, which were as hard as iron. If all the qi in his body gathered together and attacked a certain internal organ or weapon palace, it wouldn't cause such a painful feeling. However, it had only been a minute since he had started qi, and his lower dantian could no longer withstand the qi. There were signs that it was about to explode. Li Yundong quickly controlled the qi to move it to the dantian above his head. At the same time, he opened the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head, and an extremely powerful force instantly gushed out from his Baihui acupoint. There was a loud bang, as if there was a thunderclap. At this time, they were in the cave. The loud noise was really deafening. Even though Zi Yuan's cultivation was profound, she still felt a sharp pain in her eardrums. She couldn't help but frown. At this time, Li Yundong woke up from his meditation. He said with lingering fear, "It's so powerful. Just now, the lower dantian in my lower abdomen almost exploded." Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong speechlessly and said, "You haven't learned to walk yet, but you want to learn to run. First, you should slowly master this power, and then step by step, deepen and increase the strength of this power. Don't think about doing it overnight. There will be problems. If there is a problem with practicing thunder magic, not to mention me, even the Jade Emperor can't save you." Li Yundong laughed and said, "It's okay. I just want to try the thunder magic driven by the qi of the five elements. Later, I'll try the thunder magic driven by the qi of mixed elements and see how it works." Before Zi Yuan could speak, Li Yundong had already entered meditation. After a while, his primordial spirit went out of his body and went straight into the air. Zi Yuan couldn't stop it. Zi Yuan sighed and thought to herself, Li Yundong, don't mess around. This is Mount Longhu. This is the most powerful place in the world. If you make any trouble, it will be difficult to clean up. While Li Yundong and Zi Yuan were practicing thunder magic on the side peak, in the Shangqing Palace on the main peak of Mount Longhu, the Lady of the Earthly Fire, Zhang Ling, was refining the soul of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who she had brought back. In this palace, there was a huge magic circle in front of Zhang Ling. The magic circle was surrounded by the 8 trigrams of heaven and earth, and in the middle was Yin Yang Tai Chi. 2 water platforms were placed on the 2 points of Yin and Yang. The water platforms were full of all kinds of black and white talismans and patterns. In the middle of the magic circle, 2 lotus buds of the same color and shape could be faintly seen. In the buds, 2 small people could be faintly seen emitting a faint fluorescent light. The 2 little people were curled up like babies, but they were only the size of a thumb. Through the pink lotus leaves, one could see that they had all 4 limbs, and even their toes could be clearly seen. The Lady of the Earthly Fire, Zhang Ling, stared at the field with a strong sense of love and joy in her eyes. Next to her stood her disciple, Zhou Ping. Zhou Ping looked at her in confusion and said curiously, "Master, I have something to ask, but I don't know if I should ask." Zhang Ling didn't look at her. She just focused on the field and asked, "Say it. Is there anything else we can't say between us?" Zhou Ping clasped her hands together and asked respectfully and doubtfully, "Master, I can understand that you want to use these twin souls to make sword souls, but why did you go through so much trouble to set up such a formation?" Zhang Ling smiled slightly. Instead of answering, she asked, "Do you know what kind of formation this is?" Zhou Ping nodded and said, "Yes, it's the 5 elements reincarnation formation." Zhang Ling turned her head and looked at her with approval. "Oh, then do you know how to use this formation?" Zhou Ping smiled and said, "Of course I do. The main purpose of this formation is to help people get rid of the memories of their past and present lives, so that they can be reborn." Zhang Ling smiled and said, "Since you know what this formation is for, why are you still asking me this question?" Zhou Ping said in confusion, "But what's the use of this for them?" Zhang Ling snorted and said, "You only know one thing, but not the other. We snatched this pair of twin souls from the cave residents of the Lingdong sect. Their origins are unknown. Do you know who they were originally? Do you know anything about them? Once these 2 people become the 2 sword spirits of the Sanja formation, the power of the Sanja formation will be completely in their hands. If they still have the memories of their previous lives, once they meet an acquaintance of the past and show mercy, the Sanja formation will be completely ineffective. At that time, are you going to take responsibility, or am I going to?" Only then did Zhou Ping come to a realization. She smiled and said, "Master, you're really thoughtful. I was careless. However, these twins seem to be coming to this world at any time." As if to confirm her words, the pair of identical flower buds suddenly emitted bursts of colorful light. Then, one petal after another slowly opened, revealing 2 identical pink and tender figures. Seeing this, Zhang Ling's expression suddenly became serious. She quickly pinched her fingers and shouted, "Pinger, protect me. I'm going to cast a spell to erase their memories of their previous lives." At this moment, in the sky outside the side palace of Shangqing Palace, there was a loud and powerful sound of thunder. Chapter 368. Go to the net, for just as Zhang Ling was about to erase Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's memories of their previous lives, Li Yundong's yang spirit was mobilizing the qi of heaven and earth in midair and driving the thunder away. To watch the net. The art of 5 thunders was extremely difficult to say, but as long as one's kung fu was good enough, it was extremely simple to use. Li Yundong used the yang spirit to mobilize the Hunyuan qi between heaven and earth. At first, he couldn't find out what the Hunyuan qi between heaven and earth was, but not long after, when he mobilized the purest qi in his body, the wind and clouds began to surge between heaven and earth. Especially when he used the 5 qis unifying in mind, the Hunyuan qi between heaven and earth and the qi of the 5 internal organs in his own small universe automatically connected. At this moment, Li Yundong had a feeling that he was one with heaven and man, and that the universe of heaven and earth and his own small universe had become one. It was as if he had suddenly become infinitely large. His eyes were the gaze of the sky, and his feet were the thickness of the earth. With a thought, Li Yundong felt that the water between the earth and the sky began to evaporate from the bottom to the top. These water droplets gathered and collided in the air, gradually forming thick dark clouds one after another. Then, Li Yundong could feel an inexplicable force between heaven and earth gathering in the clouds. This force was connected to the qi of his 5 internal organs. He could mobilize it, drive it, and command it. At first, Li Yundong was wild with excitement. He suddenly realized that he could actually drive thunder and lightning. He actually knew the most powerful magic in the world. But not long after, Li Yundong couldn't be happy anymore. The speed of the power gathering in the clouds was far beyond Li Yundong's imagination. At first, Li Yundong felt like he was riding a fierce horse. Although the horse was fierce, he could still control it. But then one horse became 2 horses, and 2 horses became 4 horses. Not long after, it became a scene of thousands of horses galloping. How could he control it? Li Yundong suddenly felt that he was in a difficult position. If he gave up controlling this power, it would backfire on him. But if he casually released this power, he was afraid that it would hit the secular mortals. At that time, there would be another heavenly tribulation, and then he would be in big trouble. Li Yundong thought for a while, and suddenly his heart skipped a beat. He looked at the main peak of Mount Longhu, where Shangqing Palace was located. He looked down from above and saw that the rebuilt Shangqing Palace was sitting in the lush forest. He could faintly see the cornices, dugong, and Taoist memorial arches. He couldn't help but think, the Zhenyi school has repeatedly gone against Ziyuan, and they are so aggressive against me and the Fox Zen school. I might as well give this heavenly thunder to the Zhenyi school. As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Li Yundong simply guided this power to the position of Shangqing Palace on Mount Longhu. He had originally wanted to hit the main hall of Shangqing Palace, but it was the first time he had used the thunder method, so it was inevitable that it would be a little impure. With a boom, the heavenly thunder hit a side palace of Shangqing Palace. Coincidentally, this side palace happened to be where Zhongling and Zhou Ping were. When the heavenly lightning struck down, it immediately broke the roof tiles of the side palace and fell heavily on the heads of the 2 people. Zhongling reacted very quickly. The moment the heavenly thunder was about to fall, all the hair on her body immediately stood on end. She instantly crushed a talisman hidden in her sleeve, raised her hand, and pointed her finger in the air. Quick! With a rumbling sound, a wall of fire appeared above their heads. When the heavenly lightning struck the wall of fire, it was as if the heavenly lightning struck the fire. It immediately caused a violent explosion, and black smoke quickly enveloped all of them. Not long after, the Lady of the Earthly Fire covered her nose with one hand and waved her sleeve with the other. A strong gust of wind was produced from the cuff of her sleeve, which quickly dispersed the thick black smoke in the hall. She fixed her eyes on Zhou Ping and saw that her beautiful and precious disciple had become a kitchen god. She had a black mouth and a black face. When she opened her mouth, even her teeth were black. The Lady of the Earthly Fire took a deep breath and said angrily, "Who dares to be presumptuous in Mount Longhu? Are you tired of living?" Her shout immediately spread far and wide, causing the mountains to tremble, and the echoes continued to echo. Zhou Ping didn't react at all. She couldn't understand why she had almost been hit by a heavenly thunder on the main peak of Mount Longhu. She was still in shock. Her eyes widened as she stammered, Master, what's going on? Where did the heavenly thunder come from?" Just as the Lady of the Earthly Fire was about to speak, she glanced around and suddenly saw that in the array of the main hall, the souls of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao had still been born. They were quietly lying on the blooming lotus platform, sleeping peacefully. They were naked from head to toe, and their skin was as pink as jelly. It was as if they could be poked with a finger. The Lady of the Earthly Fire immediately stomped her feet and sighed. It's too late. The two sword souls have already been born. It's too late to erase their memories of their previous lives. Alas, could this be the will of the heavens? Zhou Ping also said angrily, "Damn it, I don't know who dared to strike Mount Longhu with lightning. It's like saying filial piety in front of Confucius and showing off in front of Guan Yu. He's overestimating himself. Does he think that our Mount Longhu is easy to bully?" After that, she suddenly rose into the air and looked for the person who had attracted the lightning in all directions. As soon as Zhou Ping rose into the air, she saw many people flying from the side palaces and halls around her. Most of them were wearing Taoist robes. As soon as they saw Zhou Ping, they asked loudly, "Little Shizhi, what happened just now?" Zhou Ping opened her mouth and was about to say that a thief had attacked Mount Longhu, but Zhang Ling appeared beside her and held her down with one hand, not letting her speak. Zhang Ling replied loudly, "Nothing. Just now, my disciple had a problem with her thunder cultivation. Senior brothers and junior brothers, I've troubled you." These flying Taoists had all heard Zhang Ling's roar before, and their hearts were as clear as a mirror. They didn't expose her, but when they heard her words, some of them laughed and flew back to where they came from. Some of them, who usually didn't get along with Zhang Ling, said sarcastically, "Lady of the Earthly Fire, your disciple should have just played with your fire. Why did she play with thunder for no reason? Do you think that our Mount Longhu doesn't have enough Taoist temples that have been demolished?" The Lady of the Earthly Fire snorted coldly and didn't argue with them. She pulled Zhou Ping and flew back to the hall. Zhou Ping was shocked and whispered, "Master, why didn't you tell them the truth?" The Lady of the Earthly Fire sneered and said, "What should I say? Saying that our side hall was destroyed by an unknown person? Humph, if this matter spreads, we will become the laughingstock of the cultivation world the next day. Do you want to be laughed at?" Zhou Ping said anxiously, "Then are we just going to take this lying down? At the very least, we have to find out who did it." The Lady of the Earthly Fire sneered and said, "Humph, how dare he lead thunder to strike our Mount Longhu? This person is really the #1 madman since ancient times. He can't run away." After that, the Lady of the Earthly Fire sat down cross-legged on the ground and shouted to Zhou Ping, "Send the twin sword souls to the main hall. Since you can't erase their soul memories, then don't do so. This is the will of heaven, and it's not good to force it. Now, I'm going to use the heaven and earth soul-searching method to find the whereabouts of this madman. After you send the sword souls, come back and protect me. Don't let anyone take advantage of the situation later." Zhou Ping nodded in agreement. Her figure swept across the field like a swallow cutting through water. With a light turn of her wrist, her fingers picked up the souls of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, and then she quickly took them to the main hall. On the other side of Mount Longhu, Li Yundong had just bent over with his yang spirit when he saw a figure rushing in front of him and shouting in horror, "Are you crazy? How dare you strike Mount Longhu with lightning?" Li Yundong took a closer look and saw that the person who was shouting like a madman was none other than Zi Yuan, who was usually as calm as a fairy. Li Yundong asked curiously, "What's so strange about that? They bully you so much every day, and you still think about them. Aren't you being too kind?" Zi Yuan looked like she was about to collapse. Her face was ashen as she said quickly, "You're really crazy. There are countless masters of thunder magic in the Zhengyi school. How dare you play with thunder here? You're too arrogant. Let's go, hurry up and follow me." Li Yundong laughed and was about to speak when he suddenly heard an extremely angry voice roar from the main peak. "Who dares to be so presumptuous in Mount Longhu? Are you tired of living? This roar shook Li Yundong so much that he almost jumped up from the ground. He even felt that the soles of his feet were numb from the shock. Li Yundong was shocked and couldn't help but ask, "Who is this?" Zhang Tianshi, the sect leader of the Zhengyi school. So powerful. Zi Yuan no longer cared about her usual calmness. She hurriedly grabbed Li Yundong's arm and pulled him out of the cave. Then she quickly said, "This is the Lady of the Earthly Fire, Zhang Ling. She is a great cultivator with extremely high cultivation and is the elder sister of Zhang Tianshi of the Zhengyi school. If she comes to catch us, you and I can barely resist her. But there are countless masters of cultivation in Mount Longhu. If any one of them comes, we won't be able to resist. Let's go, or we won't be able to get away." After that, she had already pulled Li Yundong out of the cave. As soon as the two of them rushed out of the cave, they looked up and saw that the sky was full of flying Taoists. They were as dense as the stars. Li Yundong would have been fine if he hadn't seen it. When he saw it, he immediately gasped. He only felt that he was sweating profusely and his scalp was numb. F***ck, we've poked a hornet's nest. Li Yundong said, dumbfounded. Zi Yuan glared at him angrily, then pulled Li Yundong and ran down the mountain. There were Taoists everywhere in the sky, so the two of them didn't dare to fly. They ran all the way out of the sphere of influence of Mount Longhu. When they saw that no one was flying in the night sky, they dared to fly into the air. After confirming that there were no pursuers behind them, they headed for Tiannan City. Zi Yuan pulled Li Yundong all the way out of Mount Longhu. Only when they were far away from Mount Longhu did she feel relieved. She let go of Li Yundong's hand and couldn't help but ask anxiously, "Did you take the wrong medicine just now? Why did you attract thunder to Mount Longhu?" Li Yundong smiled embarrassedly. "I couldn't control it." Zi Yuan looked like she was going crazy. "Then don't hit the main peak. There are 99 peaks for you to hit. Why did you hit the main peak, Shangqing Palace? Oh my god, if this matter gets out, the Zhengyi school will go crazy. We'll be on the run tomorrow." Li Yundong was shocked and said guiltily, "No way. They don't know, do they?" Zi Yuan glared at Li Yundong. "Maybe they didn't find out this time, but there can't be a next time." Li Yundong smiled apologetically and said, "No, absolutely not." Zi Yuan snorted and looked at Li Yundong as if she was looking at a madman. She shook her head and said, "Forget it, let's go back quickly. Don't mention what happened tonight to anyone." Li Yundong laughed dryly and said, "Of course." The two of them flew for nearly 2 hours and returned to Tiannan City. Just as they were about to land at home, they saw a figure suddenly fly up from the house. This person came so fast that he almost collided with Li Yundong in midair. Don't worry, the twins will get them back, but not now. 5. Chapter 369. Go to the internet, for Li Yundong held the person and took a closer look, only to see that it was Su Chan. Go to the internet. 7 K.O.M. Li Yundong asked curiously, "It's so late. What are you doing out here?" Su Chan was also surprised. She looked at Li Yundong and then looked at Zi Yuan. She asked curiously, "Yundong, what are you and Sister Zi Yuan doing so late?" Li Yundong immediately coughed dryly and said, "I asked you first. You go first." Su Chan rolled her eyes and glanced at the two of them. Although she was a little puzzled, she didn't take it to heart. She said, "I seem to have seen a person flying out of the residence just now. I thought it was strange, so I came out to have a look. I didn't expect to see you." Li Yundong didn't take it to heart. He said, "Maybe it's a Sherbua or a little disciple of the Fox Zen school who went out to play." Zi Yuan's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. She asked, Su Chan, did you see who this person was? Su Chan thought for a moment and said, it seems to be Shibua Chao Yi or Shibua Zhuang Yiting. Their figures are a little similar, but I can't tell them apart. Zi Yuan thought for a moment and immediately said decisively, where did they fly to? Let's chase after them. Su Chan didn't think much about it. She pointed in a direction and said, they flew that way. Zi Yuan said to Li Yundong, let's go and have a look. Li Yundong was confused. What's there to chase? Zi Yuan didn't allow him to explain. She dragged him and chased after them, saying, you'll know when we catch up. When Su Chan saw the two of them quickly chasing after them, she also turned into a ray of green light and caught up with the two of them. The little girl followed behind them and muttered in her heart, what's wrong with Sister Zi Yuan? Why does she look like she's facing a great enemy? However, I don't know if the person in front is Shibua Chao Yi or Shibua Zhuang Yiting. It's so late. What is she doing out here? Su Chan quickly flew to the front to lead the way. Li Yundong asked in confusion, how did you see someone fly out? It's already so late, what are you doing here instead of sleeping? I wanted to ask Shibua Chao Yi to help me, but when I went to her room, I didn't see her. Just as I was about to leave, I saw a figure flying past the window. I was curious, so I chased after it. I didn't expect to meet you. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and looked at Zi Yuan. He was deep in thought, but he didn't ask again. After chasing for a while, Su Chan suddenly pointed to the front and said, look, there. Li Yunyang and Zi Yuan looked into the distance at the same time and saw an extremely weak cyan light flash through the distant night sky. Zi Yuan and Li Yunyang immediately perked up and said, chase. The three of them followed the target closely and kept a distance behind it. After flying for nearly 2 hours, Zi Yuan suddenly said, no, why do I feel like we're back in Jiangxi again? Li Yundong asked curiously, Jiangxi? Could he have returned to Mount Longhu? At this time, Su Chan stretched her head over and asked curiously, again? Why do you say again? Yundong, when did you come to Mount Longhu in Jiangxi? Li Yundong laughed dryly and quickly changed the topic. Let's talk about this later. It's more important to keep an eye on them now. While the three of them were talking, they saw a flash of cyan light in the distance, and then it quickly fell. Zi Yuan's voice tightened as she said, let's go down too. It's too easy to be a target in the air. The three of them quickly descended. As soon as they landed on the ground, Li Yunyang looked around in the moonlight and saw that they were surrounded by mountains. At the foot of the mountains were fields. At this time, the autumn rice had been harvested, and there were rice seedlings everywhere. Su Chan blinked and looked around. She asked curiously, where are we? Could it be Mount Longhu? She was a fox spirit, so she was naturally afraid of the places of Xianmen in Buddhism. When she thought that she was in Mount Longhu, she shuddered and felt uncomfortable. Zi Yuan looked around and roughly looked at the surrounding mountains. She shook her head and said, it doesn't look like Mount Longhu. Li Yunyang laughed and said, I know where we are. Su Chan and Zi Yuan both asked curiously, where are we? Li Yunyang smiled and said, Zi Yuan, you're right. We're back in Jiangxi. We're in Mount Gazao. Su Chan took Li Yunyang's arm and asked, how do you know? Have you been here before? Li Yunyang pointed to a road sign on the side of the road about a dozen meters away and said, isn't it written on it? Only then did Su Chan and Zi Yuan notice that there was a road sign in the distance. However, the night was dark. If it weren't for Li Yunyang's high cultivation and strong eyesight, he wouldn't have noticed it at all. The two of them took a closer look and saw a blue road sign with white characters. On it was written, Mount Gazao National Forest Park. There was still a distance below, 2 kilometers. Zi Yuan and Su Chan suddenly laughed. Su Chan couldn't help but turn around and say angrily, I thought you recognized the scenery here and recognized it. I just wanted to worship you. I didn't expect you to recognize it by looking at the road sign. It's so boring. Zi Yuan also smiled and said, I didn't expect that we would follow you to Mount Gazao. But why are the people of the Fox Zen school here? This is the holy land of Taoism. Li Yunyang smiled and gestured to the two of them, saying, let's go. We'll talk as we walk. Let's go to the Gazao sect first to see what's going on. Su Chan, your tracking skills are good. You lead the way. Okay. Su Chan replied crisply. Although the little girl knew that this was the holy land of Taoism and was a little afraid, when she thought of her lover beside her, she couldn't help but become bolder. Instead, she became a little excited. Li Yundong looked at Su Chan's glowing eyes and felt worried. He was afraid that she would cause a disaster like the one he had caused when he struck Mount Longhu. Hey, don't cause trouble, he said hurriedly. Su Chan looked back at him with a smile and said, I won't. Li Yunyang turned around to greet Zi Yuan, only to see that she was looking at him strangely with a faint smile, as if to say, as long as you don't cause trouble, everything will be fine. Li Yunyang quickly smiled apologetically and said, Jinren Zi Yuan. Sister Immortal. Please. Zi Yuan gave Li Yunyang a meaningful look, smiled, and followed Su Chan. In the end, she didn't say anything about Li Yunyang. Li Yunyang secretly wiped his cold sweat and thought to himself, Zi Yuan is getting more and more difficult to deal with. The three of them were very strong, and they quickly went up the mountain. The asphalt road led straight to the top of the mountain, and it didn't take long for them to arrive at a huge archway. Li Yunyang looked at it with the help of the moonlight and saw a stone gate sitting on the road. It had cornices, bucket arches, glazed yellow tiles, a white low wall, two small doors on the left and right, and a big door in the middle. From right to left, the words, Mount Gazao, were written. On the stone pillars on the left and right of the door, there was a couplet written in traditional Chinese. On the right was, famous Taoist mountain Bizhang Qingjiang Zhong Shui. On the left was, holy land of medical sects spirit pills and miraculous medicines are rare. Li Yundong looked at the door and saw that it seemed to be newly built, but it was full of traces of wind and rain. There were weeds growing on the glazed tiles on the roof of the archway. Obviously, it lacked maintenance, especially the two iron fences on the small doors on both sides, which were even more rusty. The words on the travel notice blackboard on the right were also colorful and blurry. He couldn't help but be shocked. No matter what, the Gazao sect is a big sect of external alchemy. How could its signboard and gatehouse become like this? Zi Yuan sighed slightly and said, there's nothing I can do about it. The royal power is greater than the divine power. During the Song dynasty, there were more than 1,500 Taoist temples, more than 500 Taoist priests, and 3,000 acres of fertile land. The Taoists called it the Immortal Mansion. But at the end of the Qing dynasty, Mount Gazao, like Mount Longhu and other places, suffered repeated dangers. The incense of the Taoist temple, which had lasted for more than 1,600 years, finally declined. Especially after Wan Jinyuan, the leader of the Gazao sect, succeeded, he worked hard to move the sect's power out to the city. He corporatized the sect's power and turned it into an invisible force, but his own ancestral court declined beyond recognition. Su Chan looked up at the door plate with the words, Mount Gazao, and sighed faintly. Yes, our Fox Zen school was also very glorious back then, but now it has withered beyond recognition. It can be seen that the rise and fall, victory and defeat, this is the reincarnation of fate. There's no other way. Li Yundong smiled and interrupted the two of them. Come on, let's go up the mountain first. The three of them quickly went up the mountain along the road. Along the way, they passed by the Bridge of Immortality, the Mountain Gate, the Heavenly Gate, the Mingshui Bridge, and other scenic spots. Although Li Yundong only took a quick look at them, these scenic spots full of vicissitudes of life still made him feel cold and lonely, especially the Mingshui Bridge. The mountain stream under the bridge was almost dry, and the riverbed stones were covered with moss and weeds. It was like a lonely old man sighing about the ruthlessness of time. Not long after, Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, and Su Chan arrived at the gate of the main courtyard of the Gazao sect. They saw that it was a large square courtyard. At the main entrance was a gate with red walls and yellow tiles. The gate was divided into 2 floors. In the middle of the top floor and the bottom floor, there were 2 large golden characters on a green background. Below the 2 characters on a black background were majestically written, the Wanshou Chongzhen Palace. Although the signboard of the Taoist temple still looked very old, especially with weeds all over the top, these words were still majestic and brilliant, showing the world its former glory and prestige. Zi Yuan sighed softly and said, "There are countless Taoist temples in China, and there are also many with the name Chongzhen. However, there are so many Taoist temples in the country, but there is no one with the word De in front of Chongzhen. It's a pity that the famous mountain of the Song dynasty has declined to this extent." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Don't sigh. If you continue to sigh, be careful that your Lingdong sect will become like them. Let's go in and see what's going on. If we waste too much time, we won't be able to find them later." As he said this, he was about to go in, but as soon as he was about to move, he was pulled back by Zi Yuan. Zi Yuan said with a solemn expression, "Don't be careless. Although the Gazao sect has declined, it is only the ancestral court that has declined. In fact, the power of the Gazao sect in the mortal world is still very great. This is the holy land of the Gazao sect. Even a rotten ship has 3 nails. Don't be careless. Besides, a while ago, all the major sects fought on Gazao Mountain. It is impossible for the Gazao sect not to be prepared. It is very likely that there are magic circles inside. Let me cast a spell and find out what's going on first." Li Yundong nodded and turned to look at Su Chan, who had been leading the way. "Can you be sure that the person has entered here?" Su Chan snorted and said proudly, "Although I'm not good at fighting, my escaping and tracking skills are first class. I can feel that the aura of the person we are chasing has entered the great longevity Chongzhen Palace. I can't be wrong. It's just that this person's aura is like that of Sherbua Chao Yi and Sherbua Zhuang Yiting. I can't tell which Sherbua came here and why." 5. Chapter 370. Go to watch net. Li Yundong was a little confused. Since the people of Fox Zen School can go in, why can't I go in? Although he thought so in his heart, it was better to be safe than sorry. Li Yundong didn't stop Zi Yuan. He saw Zi Yuan take out a folded yellow paper talisman from her sleeve. After gently opening it, Li Yundong clearly recognized that it was a small yellow paper man. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Zi Yuan gently bit the tip of her finger and quickly wrote a blood talisman on the paper man. Then, without asking for Li Yundong's consent, she reached out and plucked a head from his head. Li Yundong let out a soft cry and said with widened eyes, "Why did you pluck my head?" Zi Yuan ignored him and blew gently. After a while, the paper man suddenly emitted a faint yellow light and automatically flew into the air. Not long after, it turned into Li Yundong's appearance. Li Yundong was stunned. What kind of magic is this? Su Chan clapped her hands gently and exclaimed, "Is this the Liujia Yang spirit talisman from the Liujia heavenly book?" Zi Yuan looked at Su Chan in surprise. "You know about this?" Su Chan chuckled. "This magic is one of the 36 little magical powers that my master knows. I also know a little, but what I know is the Liujia Yin spirit talisman, which is not as vivid as yours. He, when I fought with my master and escaped from Uncle Master Mo Ashi, no, it was Yen Fong, I used the Liujiayin spirit talisman. Zi Yuan smiled and said, with your spiritual energy, it's already amazing that you know the Liujiayin spirit talisman. Su Chan giggled. I think this magic is fun, so I studied it hard. Other magic is not fun, so I can't use it well. Li Yundong smiled and tapped Su Chan's nose. You still have the nerve to say that? As he said this, he turned to Zi Yuan and said, why didn't you use your own head? Why did you use mine? Zi Yuan said lightly, you are more annoying. He turned his head and whispered to Su Chan, am I that annoying? Su Chan giggled and made a face at Li Yundong. She nodded vigorously and said, disgusting. So disgusting. He glared at Su Chan and said, fine, I'll deal with you when we get back. Little girl, if you don't get beaten for 3 days, you'll go to the roof and tear the tiles, right? The little girl rolled her eyes and held his arm with a smile. She said coquettishly, sir, you can't bear to part with me, can you? Your little girl is the most obedient. Zi Yuan saw that the two of them were so close to each other that they didn't care about the occasion at all. She said helplessly in a low voice, hey, do you think you're at home? Only then did Li Yundong and Su Chan react. They looked at each other and smiled at the same time. Li Yundong was thick-skinned and said to Zi Yuan with a cheeky smile, Jinren Zi Yuan, please lead the way. Zi Yuan had never seen a person as thick-skinned as Li Yundong. She rolled her eyes at him and drove the Liujiayang spirit talisman into the Taoist temple. Then, she followed the dummy about 10 meters behind. At this time, it was late at night, and the surroundings were frighteningly quiet. Only the sound of insects could be heard, and even the rustling sound of the dummy walking could be heard clearly. Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, and Su Chan followed the dummy inside for a while. Along the way, they hid in the shadows along the wall and walked slowly, while the dummy walked openly on the main road. They passed by the Taiji wall and the main hall. When they were walking to the side hall, they suddenly heard a faint conversation drifting over with the night wind. Although the voice was weak, Li Yundong could vaguely recognize that one of them was the voice of an old man, and the other was the deep voice of a middle-aged man. In particular, this old voice sounded particularly familiar to Li Yundong, as if he had heard it somewhere before. The old voice said slowly and hoarsely, how's your refining of the Diyuan Jindan going? A middle-aged man said, there's still one more herb missing. Aren't those 2 big golden snakes enough? Not enough. What else? Still. Before the voice finished speaking, Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, and Su Chan, who were listening attentively, saw a flash of white light in front of them at the same time. The dummy transformed from the Liujiayang spirit talisman, who was walking in front, suddenly had its neck cut by a sharp weapon. Then, the fake Li Yundong's head fell to the ground with a thud. Soon, the dummy transformed from the Liujiayang spirit talisman began to burn with a bang. Although the voice was soft, it was as loud as thunder in the dark night. The 2 voices that were talking immediately stopped. Li Yundong was so shocked that he felt a chill run down his spine. Li Yundong felt a lingering fear in his heart. He couldn't help touching his neck and secretly looked at Zi Yuan with admiration. He thought to himself, after all, she is the descendant of a famous family and has rich experience. If she hadn't been careful, I'm afraid my head would have been removed. I just don't know what kind of magical item it was just now. It was so fierce and domineering, so fierce and sudden. Zi Yuan opened her mouth and was about to speak, but her expression changed. She quickly took out another talisman and poured her jinqi into it. Then, she wiped it in front of the 3 of them. Li Yundong immediately saw a flowing transparent light curtain appear around him. Su Chan whispered in surprise, Nyan goddess seal. Li Yundong glanced at her and said in a low voice, what seal? Su Chan leaned close to Li Yundong's ear and whispered, it's the invisibility talisman. We can see the people outside, but the people outside can't see us. It's also a talisman from the Wuxia heavenly book. As she said this, the little girl proudly showed off, I also know this magic. Only then did Li Yundong understand. He smiled and tapped Su Chan's nose. Little girl, you know a lot of things. Not bad. Let me praise you. While the two of them were whispering to each other, Zi Yuan suddenly turned her head and made a gesture to keep quiet. Don't make a sound. Li Yundong and Su Chan immediately shut their mouths. They stared at a figure pushing the door open and coming out of the side palace. This person looked like a woman with a graceful figure. She was carrying a lantern, and her figure was shrouded in a dim yellow candlelight. She was getting closer and closer. Li Yundong saw that the woman's upper body was shrouded in the darkness, so he couldn't recognize her face clearly. However, her figure was a little familiar. When she walked to the place where the dummy transformed from the Wuxia Yang spirit talisman had been killed, the woman stopped and looked around. She bent down and picked up a Wuxia Yang spirit talisman that had been burned. She raised the lantern and took a closer look. At this time, Li Yundong and Su Chan immediately saw the person's face clearly with the help of the moonlight. They saw that this person's face was coquettish and full of the aura of a prostitute. Who else could it be but the dead Meng Yang? Su Chan was so shocked that she almost cried out. Fortunately, she reacted quickly and covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were wide open, as if she couldn't understand why Meng Yang, who had once been dead, was now alive in front of her. Li Yundong was also stunned and thought in his heart, Meng Yang. That's impossible. Wasn't she sucked dry to death? How could she appear here alive? This can't be fake too, can it? As soon as he thought of this, he saw Meng Yang turn around and shout at the side hall, there's no one here. It's just a half-burned talisman. Li Yundong heard that her voice was clear and loud. It was clearly the voice of Meng Yang he had met before. Su Chan also moved closer to him and said in a low voice, it's Meng Yang. I remember this voice. It's Meng Yang's voice. Li Yundong sucked in a breath of cold air. He felt that his mind was a little messy, but there was a faint light in the messy place, as if he had understood something. But when he thought about it, he felt that the light was surrounded by a thick fog of mystery, and he couldn't clear it even if he stretched out his hand to clear it. Just as Li Yundong was about to speak, he saw Zi Yuan turn her head and glare at Li Yundong. She made a gesture of silence and then transmitted her voice, are you tired of living? Don't speak. At this time, even if a needle falls, everyone can hear it. Li Yundong saw Zi Yuan glaring at him, so he also glared at Su Chan. Then, he mouthed silently, did you hear that? I'm talking to you. Su Chan quickly covered her mouth with her hand and looked at Li Yundong eagerly. Her eyes were full of grievance. The little girl thought pitifully in her heart, it's obvious that Sister Zi Yuan is glaring at you. Why are you scolding me? While the little girl was thinking, she heard the deep voice of a middle-aged man coming from the wing room of the side hall. The man said loudly, it's the middle of the night. I don't know which fellow Taoist has come to visit. Why don't you show up and meet us? Li Yundong didn't know how to transmit his voice, so he wrote on Zi Yuan's back with his hand, should we show up? Zi Yuan rarely had skin contact with men. She only felt an itch on her back, and she was so uncomfortable that she wanted to twist her body to avoid Li Yundong's fingertips. She waited for Li Yundong to write a few times before she understood what he meant. She raised her hand and waved at him. Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan didn't agree. Although he felt strange in his heart, he also made up his mind to continue hiding. The three of them restrained their auras completely and didn't release any of it. The middle-aged man asked again. Seeing that no one responded, he sneered and said, those who dare to break into our Gazao sect at night must not be easy to deal with. Since you're here, why don't you dare to show up? Could it be that he's a tortoise? The middle-aged man was trying to provoke him. Hearing this, Li Yundong was secretly unhappy. He thought to himself, so be it. We're just here to find someone, not to do anything bad. What's so shameful about it? But as soon as this thought flashed through his mind, he saw a figure suddenly appear in the dark starry sky. This person was holding a 3-feet-long qingfeng sword. Her long hair fluttered like an immortal's, her figure was exquisite, and her face was as beautiful as jade. However, her eyebrows were sharp, making her look aggressive. Li Yundong took a look and was shocked. He saw that this person was none other than Yan Fang's out-of-body yang spirit that he had seen on Mount Tianlong. The 3-feet-long qingfeng sword in her hand was also the liuhe that he had once used. Su Chan was also so shocked that her mouth was wide open. Her face showed strong excitement and anger. She thought to herself, why is Yan Fang here? Where's my master? What did she do to my master? Li Yundong and Su Chan were so shocked that their expressions changed, but Zi Yuan's face was as dark as water. She thought to herself, as I expected, Second Shibwa is hiding in the Fox Zen school. If I'm not mistaken, what Su Chan saw just now was Second Shibwa's figure. However, why did Second Shibwa come to the Gazao sect so late at night? Does she have any ulterior motives? While the three of them were thinking, on the main peak of another famous Taoist mountain, the Lady of the Earthly Fire, Zhang Ling, suddenly opened her eyes and said with a stern expression, what a madman. I've finally found your whereabouts. Chapter 371. Go to the net. Zhou Ping, who had been guarding beside her, quickly asked, Master, have you found that madman? The Lady of the Earthly Fire, Zhang Ling, said coldly, yes. Zhou Ping asked angrily, who is it? Who dares to be so arrogant? Zhang Ling said in a cold voice, I thought it was someone who dared to be so arrogant as to strike Mount Longhu with lightning. I didn't expect that the person I was tracking would take a detour and finally return to Mount Gazao. Zhou Ping gasped. External alchemy? Gazao sect? No way. Zhang Ling sneered and said, why is it impossible? The Gazao sect has always been at odds with us. They compete fiercely with us in business. A while ago, when the Renyuan Jindan appeared, some people from our sect also went to snatch it. It's normal for Wan Jinyuan to hold a grudge. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. I just didn't expect that Wan Jinyuan would be so despicable now and do such a shameless thing. Zhou Ping said hatefully, are we just going to take this lying down? Zhang Ling stood up and laughed. A small Gazao sect dares to bully us. Humph, Wan Jinyuan is really tired of living. Let's go and ask for an explanation. At first, Zhou Ping looked happy, but soon she hesitated and asked, Master, the Gazao sect is a big sect of the external alchemy. I'm afraid it's not good for us to go there like this. Do you want to inform the sect leader first? Zhang Ling glanced at Zhou Ping. What? Does the leader have to ask about everything in the Zhengyi school? Can't I, the elder sister of the leader, make the decision? Wan Jinyuan dared to be presumptuous in our Mount Longhu. Why can't we go to Mount Gazao? In a word, are you going or not? If not, I'll go alone. After that, she snorted coldly and instantly turned into a blue light and left. Zhou Ping was stunned for a moment. She gritted her teeth, stomped her feet, and chased after her. On Mount Gazao, Li Yundong and the others were stunned when they saw Yan Fang appear. Li Yundong wrote on Zi Yuan's back, was it Liuhe that attacked Liujia Yangshan talisman just now? Zi Yuan looked back at Li Yundong, nodded slightly, and said, yes. Li Yundong wrote again, why don't you seize the sword, capture Yan Fang, and force her to tell us where Ao Wushuang is. Zi Yuan immediately said resolutely, no, the current situation is unclear. We can't act rashly. As if to prove Zi Yuan's words, Yan Fang looked down at the side hall of the Gazao sect from midair. She sneered and said, Wan Jinyuan, when did you learn to provoke people with words? Soon, a man flew out of the side hall. He was wearing a Taoist robe and a Taoist crown. He held a horsetail whisk in his left hand and a ruler in his right. Li Yundong looked up and saw that the man was about 1.7 meters tall. He had a goatee under his chin, deep eyes, and a high nose. He seemed to be a foreigner. Judging from his face, he seemed to be about 40 years old. Li Yundong was secretly surprised. Is this mixed-race guy Wan Jinyuan, the master of the Gazao sect of the external alchemy? Sure enough, the middle-aged man looked at Yan Fang with sharp eyes and said, Yan Fang, you really didn't die. I didn't expect the rumors to be true. I guess it's also your doing that the various sects are besieging the Fox Zen school. Yan Fang snorted coldly and said, so what? Wan Jinyuan smiled slightly and cupped his hands. Zhenren Yan, good method. I admire you. Yan Fang snorted arrogantly, her nose pointing to the sky. Seeing that she was so arrogant in his territory, Wan Jinyuan was secretly displeased, so he asked in a deep voice, I just don't know why Zhenren Yan has come here so late at night. Yan Fang glanced around intentionally or unintentionally, and the liuha in her hand let out a clear dragon's roar. She sneered and said, I'm here today to catch a few rats. Wan Jinyuan was secretly angry. He frowned and shouted, Zhenren Yan, I've seen that you've endured humiliation for 9 years for revenge, so I respect you a little. Don't push your luck and be too presumptuous. Yan Fang raised her head and laughed wildly. So what if I'm presumptuous? So what if I'm not presumptuous? I can come and go as I please on your Mount Gazao. What can you do to me? Wan Jinyuan was so angry that his face turned pale. He said angrily, Yan Fang, you've gone too far. Today, I'll make sure you can't leave. Yan Fang said sarcastically, Humph, you. Don't joke around. I'm afraid you don't know how many rats have come to your mountain, do you? After that, Yan Fang pointed her sword in the direction of Li Yundong and the others and shouted sternly, Scoundrel, come out by yourself. Could it be that you want me to chop off your head again? These words made Su Chan angry. She was about to jump out, but Li Yundong calmed down. He grabbed Su Chan and waved at her. Zi Yuan also nodded approvingly at Li Yundong and said, Don't get excited. Yan Fang might not know where we are. As soon as she finished speaking, a man suddenly jumped up from the wall behind them. The man stood on the yellow glazed tiles of the wall, cupped his hands, and said, Zhenren Yan, you have good eyesight. I admire you. Su Chan was shocked and looked up. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan also turned their heads and saw that the man was short and fat. He was Dang Chang of the Penglai sect, who had participated in the siege of the Fox Zen school before. When Yan Fang saw him, she frowned and said, Why are you here? Dang Chang reached out and touched his scalded head with a smile, saying, Why can't it be me? Is there someone else? Yan Fang said in a deep voice, I'm not talking about you. Dang Chang patted his forehead and said loudly, Oh, I was fooled. I fell for your bluff. Alas, I'm so damn stupid. As he said this, he turned around and shouted behind him, Hey, friends who are hiding, hurry up and show yourself. I've already exposed myself. There's no reason for you to hide, right? But after he finished shouting, his voice was sent far away. Only the sound of insects responded to his voice. Dang Chang turned around and said with a smile, Zhenren Yan, look, there's no one here. Yan Fang sneered and said, No one? Humph, could it be that those who were hiding were all ghosts? Come out, stop hiding. If I really force you out, it won't be good. With that, she shook her hand, and the Lyoha sword in her hand flew into the air. With a buzzing sound, one sword turned into two swords, two turned into four swords, and in a short while, it turned into countless sharp swords, hanging in the air, ready to attack. With a buzzing sound, it made a clanging sound, and the momentum was very terrifying. Dang Chang also turned around and howled again, "Damn it, why are you hiding? Do you want to show yourself after being pierced by 10,000 swords?" As soon as he finished speaking, another person jumped up from the wall not far away. Li Yundong and the others took a closer look and saw that the man was tall and slender, with strong limbs and two sword-like eyebrows. It was Du Fei, the jade-faced golden monkey. Du Fei stood on the wall, cupped his hands, and said indifferently, "Jinren Yen is really domineering. You actually forced me to show myself with the myriad sword formation." When Dang Chang saw him, he immediately laughed and said, "Oh, Jinren Du, nice to meet you. Why are you here?" Li Yundong and Zi Yuan, who were in the corner, were also tongue-tied. They thought to themselves, "Yeah, why is this guy here?" Du Fei didn't like Dang Chang's cheeky appearance. He snorted and didn't look at Dang Chang. He just cupped his hands to Wan Jinyuan and said, "Du Fei of the Chuanjian Dragon Sect greets Master Wan." Wan Jinyuan had not noticed that people had jumped out one after another from outside the wall of the Taoist temple. His face was very ugly. He reluctantly cupped his hands and said with a fake smile, "Jinren Du, why are you in the mood to come here so late at night?" Although Du Fei had a straightforward temper and was not good at socializing with people, nor was he good at beating around the bush with people, he was not a fool. He did not immediately explain his purpose of coming. Instead, he turned to look at Yen Fong. "Jinren Yen, what are you doing here?" Yen Fong hadn't expected that she would force two unrelated people to come out after forcing them twice in a row. This was really a case of the East not being bright, the West not being bright. She frowned and said coldly, "Do I need to tell you why I'm here? Jinren Du, are you here alone?" Du Fei snorted and said, "Of course. Do you think I have an accomplice?" Yen Fong laughed and said, "Then I'll have to ask you." After saying that, she suddenly took a deep breath and shouted, "All of you, show yourselves." This loud shout contained the kung fu of the Xianmen sect. It made the mountains tremble, the peaks and valleys echo, and the earth tremble. Li Yundong's cultivation was excellent and his foundation was deep, so he could naturally resist it. However, he knew that Su Chan would definitely not be able to resist it, so he immediately covered her ears with his hands. Behind them, Dang Chang, who was on the wall above them, was immediately shaken and fell off the wall with a cry of pain. Du Fei's body also shook, and his face suddenly turned from normal to reddish gold, and then from reddish gold to normal. Wan Jinyuan's body, which was floating in the air, also shook slightly. He said with a cold face, "Yen Fong, you are too presumptuous. This is the ancestral court of our Gazao sect. It's not your place to shout." Yen Fong sneered and said, "The ancestral court of the Gazao sect is like a vegetable garden. You, the sect leader, don't even know how many people are here. How ridiculous." As soon as she finished speaking, people jumped up one by one from the wall. They all had ugly expressions on their faces. Some rubbed their chests with their hands, while others cupped their hands and reported their sections. "I am Zhang Hongqing of the Jinshan sect. I am Chen Anji of the Donghua sect. Greetings, Master Wan and Jinren Yen." "Jinren Yen, Master Wan, I am Ming Shoka of the Yuyang sect." Li Yundong, Su Chan, and Zi Yuan watched as one cultivator after another jumped out from behind the wall. They could only stare blankly and stare blankly. Li Yundong thought to himself, "Oh my God, how many people are hiding outside the Gazao sect? I thought we were the only ones who came to the Gazao sect at night. I didn't expect that there would be so many companions." There were about a dozen of them. In the end, an old man with white hair and a ruddy face jumped up the wall with a beautiful young woman. He cupped his hands and said to the people around him with a smile, I am Zheng Yuan of the Yin Yang sect of Mount Wuhua. This is my disciple, Lu Fengping. When Li Yundong saw him, he immediately frowned, and there was a murderous look in his eyes. Especially when he saw Ding Nan beside him, his frown deepened. He thought to himself, is Ding Nan going further and further on this road of no return? When Su Chan saw Zheng Yuan, her eyes widened. She reached out and pulled Li Yundong's arm, then wrote in his palm, it's Zheng Yuan, our big enemy. What should we do? Chapter 372. Go to watch net. Li Yundong patted Su Chan's palm, shook his head gently at her, and then wrote, calm down. Let's wait and see. Go to watch net. 7 K.O.M. At this time, Yen Fang hadn't expected that her loud shout would force so many people to come out. She was also a little stunned and didn't say anything for a long time. Her face was gloomy. On the other hand, Wang Jinyuan's expression was very interesting. He hadn't expected that there would be so many people hiding under his nose. He said with an extremely ugly expression, who else is there? Come out together. At this time, the short, fat Dang Chang slowly climbed up from the top of the wall, waved his hands and said, me too. Wang Jinyuan had nowhere to vent his anger, so he immediately waved his hand. A gust of strong wind suddenly burst out of his sleeve, shaking Dang Chang off the wall again. A row of cultivators from various sects standing on top of the wall burst into laughter. However, Wang Jinyuan's face turned blue. He shouted, do you really think my Gazao sect is a vegetable garden? How dare you be so presumptuous? Who else is there? Get out here. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a gloomy voice coming from the air. A young woman and a young girl descended from the sky. Both of them were dressed in Taoist robes. One of them had her hands in her sleeves, and the other had a long sword on her back. They were slim and graceful. The young woman stared at Wang Jinyuan coldly and said, Wang Jinyuan, I'm being presumptuous. What are you going to do? Wang Jinyuan took a closer look at the woman and suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Yen Fang, who was not far away, also suddenly changed her expression. Li Yundong knew that the beautiful girl next to the woman was Zhou Ping, but he saw that the woman next to Zhou Ping was ordinary, and the red cinnabar mole between her eyebrows was particularly eye-catching. Wang Jinyuan and Yen Fang had not been so shocked when so many people jumped out before, but when they saw this woman, their expressions suddenly changed. This woman was obviously not an ordinary person. Li Yundong couldn't help but write on Zi Yuan's back and ask, who is this person? Zi Yuan's face was also solemn. She sent a voice transmission to Li Yundong and said slowly, this is Zhang Ling, the elder sister of Taoist Zhang, the leader of Zhengyi school. She is known as the Lady of the Earthly Fire. Li Yundong's expression couldn't help but change. He quickly wrote on the back of Zi Yuan, could it be the person who shouted at Mount Longhu before? Zi Yuan slowly nodded to Li Yundong. Li Yundong's expression suddenly froze. When he had struck Mount Longhu with lightning, Zhang Ling's angry shout had almost shaken Li Yundong up from the ground. What kind of cultivation was this? This kind of cultivation was simply terrifying. Li Yundong secretly calculated in his heart that if he fought with her head-on, his chances of winning would be less than 30%. Su Chan, the little fox, suddenly found that there were so many Taoist masters around her. She was so scared that she didn't even dare to breathe. She clung to Li Yundong with both hands and refused to let go, for fear that he would disappear in the next second. Li Yundong's heart was also pounding. He thought to himself, this Zhang Ling can't be chasing after me, can she? If she takes the initiative to make trouble for me, and Yen Fong also joins in the fun. I'm afraid that I will die here today. It doesn't matter if I die, but what about the girl? What if I get Zi Yuan into trouble? Li Yundong quickly calculated in his heart. Just as he was thinking, there was suddenly a change in the field. Zhang Ling's appearance made Wang Jinyuan's expression change. He looked at Zhang Ling with great vigilance and said in a deep voice, "It turns out that the Lady of the Earthly Fire has come. I'm sorry for not going out to meet you." Zhang Ling smiled coldly and didn't say anything. Zhou Ping, who was next to her, said loudly, "Wang Jinyuan, don't do that. Tell me, where were you in the first half of the night?" Wang Jinyuan was already depressed enough tonight. There were so many people hiding under his nose, but he hadn't noticed them. At this time, there was a little girl pointing at his nose and shouting. No one could stand this, let alone he was the leader of a generation and the leader of a sect. The unhappiness in Wang Jinyuan's heart had reached its peak. He said angrily, "Who are you? How dare you shout in front of me?" Zhou Ping was so angry that her face turned red. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Zhang Ling raise her hand and stop her. Zhou Ping glared at Wang Jinyuan angrily, then stood behind Zhang Ling and glared at Wang Jinyuan. Zhang Ling couldn't help looking Wang Jinyuan up and down. She asked coldly, "Master Wan, didn't you just ask me to get out? I'm out now. What can I do for you?" Wang Jinyuan was furious to be questioned in such a strange way, but he was very afraid of Zhang Ling's strength, so he suppressed his anger and said, "The Lady of the Earthly Fire must be joking. But why did you come here so late at night? What can I do for you?" Zhang Ling snorted. She stared at Wang Jinyuan sharply and said, "I have nothing else to do. I just want to ask you where you were in the first half of the night." Wang Jinyuan's face changed. "Zhang Ling, are you interrogating me like a criminal?" Zhang Ling sneered and said, "If you don't have a guilty conscience, why would you say that?" Wang Jinyuan could no longer control his anger. The blue veins on his forehead bulged. He suppressed his anger and said, "Do I need to tell you where I was in the first half of the night?" Zhang Ling didn't want to tell him that Mount Longhu had been struck by lightning. She didn't want to become a laughing stock with so many people present, so she kept asking about Wang Jinyuan's whereabouts in the first half of the night. At first, she had some doubts in her heart, but when she saw that Wang Jinyuan refused to tell her where he had been in the first half of the night, she suddenly became suspicious and became more and more certain that it was Wang Jinyuan who had struck Mount Longhu. Zhang Ling raised her head and laughed, saying, "If you don't want others to know, don't do it. You refuse to answer such a simple question, so it can be seen that you do have a guilty conscience. Master Wan, I'm afraid you didn't expect that I already knew what you had done." Wang Jinyuan's face changed dramatically. Jinqi suddenly gushed out of his body, and purple qi surrounded him. He said murderously, "What did you find?" Seeing Wang Jinyuan's fierce expression, Zhang Ling immediately shouted, "Wang Jinyuan, you finally admit it. Humph, well, let me test the strength of the #1 master of external alchemy today." After that, she took out her hands from the wide sleeves of her Taoist robe, revealing a pair of crimson hands. Zhang Ling suddenly clapped her hands, and there was a loud bang in front of her. The ground under her feet shattered into countless cracks, and dark red flames could be faintly seen surging under these cracks. Countless flames rose from the ground and surrounded Zhang Ling's palms, gathering into a raging and burning fire dragon. The cultivators on the wall gasped and said in surprise, "What's going on? Why did they start fighting without saying a word?" Zheng Yuan also began to act as a peacemaker. "The Lady of the Earthly Fire, Master Wan, listen to me. Don't fight first. What the hell is going on? If you want to fight, why don't you let us figure it out first?" Zhang Ling was proud and arrogant. Except for her younger brother, who was the leader of the sect, she did not respect anyone in the world. She immediately shouted at Zheng Yuan unceremoniously, "It's none of your business. Who asked you to talk?" Jing Yuan's face changed, and a ferocious look flashed in his eyes. However, he quickly controlled himself and said to Wang Jinyuan with a smile, "Master Wan, if you have something to say, we can talk it out. Why do you have to fight?" Wang Jinyuan's face was gloomy. He looked at the cultivators on the wall with an unfriendly gaze and sneered. "Talk it out. Well, tell me what you are here for tonight. If you don't make it clear, none of you will leave alive today." Wang Jinyuan's words made the faces of these cultivators change greatly. Some of them with bad tempers immediately began to curse. Wang Jinyuan's face became more and more ferocious, and his murderous aura became stronger and stronger. Seeing the murderous aura on the field, Dang Chang suddenly rolled his eyes and said loudly to Yan Fang, "Jinren Yan, you've forced us all out. Do you want to take advantage of the situation?" Yan Fang didn't expect that her loud shout would force so many people to come out. Seeing that the situation on the field was getting more and more chaotic, she really wanted to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight and reap the benefits. But when she heard Dang Chang's words, her wishful thinking was seen through, and she was dragged into the chaos and couldn't get out. She couldn't help but curse, "You short man, what bullshit are you talking about?" Dang Chang fanned his nose with his hand and laughed loudly. "It stinks. I'm not talking nonsense. You really wanted to force us out just now. That's why so many things have happened." Wang Jinyuan couldn't help but shout, "Why did so many people come to my Gazao sect so late at night? Wasn't it enough to snatch the Rinyuan Jindan last time? Do you really think our Gazao sect is a pushover?" Dang Chang giggled and said, "Master Wan, you guessed right. We're really here for the Rinyuan Jindan." Wang Jinyuan's expression changed. He said angrily, "Didn't you already take the Rinyuan Jindan? Why are you here again?" At this time, Du Fei suddenly said, "Master Wan, to tell you the truth, I recently heard that there is a second Rinyuan Jindan in the Gazao sect, so I came to the Gazao sect to find out." As soon as Du Fei finished speaking, the cultivators of the other sects also nodded in agreement. "Yes, we also heard the rumor, so we came to have a look. If there really is a second Rinyuan Jindan, Master Wan, we are willing to buy it at a high price." "That's right, Master Wan, how much do you want? Name a price." "Yes, we can also exchange powerful magical weapons with you, as long as you say so." As Wang Jinyuan listened to the chaotic voices of these cultivators, he couldn't help but raise his head and laugh. As he laughed, the purple chi on his face became more and more vigorous, as if his whole body was shrouded in a thick cloud of purple mist. He laughed for a while, then glanced at Zhang Ling coldly and said, "You're here to make trouble out of nothing." Then he glanced at Yan Fang and said, "You're here to put the blame on others." As he said this, Wang Jinyuan glanced at the cultivators on the wall and sneered, "You're here to take advantage of the situation." Wang Jinyuan spat out a stream of purple chi from his nose. Gradually, the purple chi around him slowly transformed into a pattern of Tai Chi and 8 diagrams. He shook the horsetail whisk in his hand and said ferociously, "It's not enough to steal a Rinyuan Jindan. You actually came here again. Very good, very good. It seems that you really don't take me, the master of the Gazao sect, seriously. Today, none of you can leave." After that, he flicked the horsetail whisk in his hand and shot out 2 gusts of gang wind, fiercely whipping toward Zhang Ling and Yan Fang at the same time. Zhang Ling saw that the gang wind was coming fiercely. If she was hit, it would be no different from being hit by a steel whip. She shouted, "Come on." With a fierce wave of her hand, a blazing fire dragon suddenly rushed toward Wang Jinyuan. Yan Fang sneered and didn't move at all. The Liuha behind her blocked the gang wind with a clang, then turned into countless flying swords and rushed toward Wang Jinyuan. The scene suddenly became chaotic. 16b. Chapter 373. Go to watch net. When the cultivators of the major sects saw the three of them fighting, they were shocked. Some of them also took action, trying to persuade the three of them to leave. Du Fei raised the golden stick in his hand and smashed it at Yan Fang's flying sword. He shouted, "Don't fight. Let's talk it out." Seeing that the situation was in chaos, Zheng Yuan smiled sinisterly and quietly released 2 ox-hair needles to stab the cultivators next to him. Go to watch net. 7 K.O.M. These cultivators had not expected that the kind-looking man with white hair and a youthful face would be so cruel and merciless. Suddenly, several of them were hit. Among them, there were some who had their own differences. Now that they were provoked by someone, they immediately cried out in alarm. They looked at the people around them in bewilderment. After exchanging a few glances, they immediately started fighting with each other. Zheng Yuan was overjoyed, but he shouted, "Everyone, don't fight. We are all the same. Let's talk it out." But from time to time, he would play dirty tricks, making the situation more and more chaotic. Ding Nan looked at the chaotic situation in front of her and asked in a low voice, "Master, what's going on?" Zheng Yuan smiled sinisterly and said, "Isn't this better? The more chaotic it is, the easier it will be for us to fish in troubled waters." "Humph, my good disciple, don't you want that Renyuan Jin Dan?" Ever since Ding Nan had joined Zheng Yuan's sect, she had heard a lot about the cultivation world from him, especially about the time when the Renyuan Jin Dan had appeared and the time when Li Yundong had begun to rise. Ding Nan had privately guessed that Li Yundong had changed so much because he had taken the Renyuan Jin Dan. If Li Yundong could suddenly become so powerful after taking the Renyuan Jin Dan, what about her? If she also became a great cultivator, would Li Yundong have to look up to her from then on? As soon as Ding Nan thought of this, her heart began to pound. At this time, Li Yundong was dumbfounded. He had never expected that when he and Zi Yuan went to the Linggong sect to get the 5 Thunders Jade Book, and then followed a Shirbua of the Fox Zen school to Mount Gazao, they would cause such a big melee. He couldn't help but look at Zi Yuan. He wanted to ask her opinion and see what they should do now, but when he turned his head, he saw that Zi Yuan was also dumbfounded. She was staring blankly at the scene and couldn't say a word. Obviously, she was also helpless and had no way to deal with it. Su Chan pulled Li Yundong's arm. At this time, the scene was chaotic. She was not afraid of being heard, so she lowered her voice and said, "Yundong, what should we do now?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart. "You ask me, but who do I ask?" But just as he was about to speak, he saw that Mei Nyang, who had already been paralyzed with fear, was taking advantage of the fact that the cultivators on the field were fighting and not paying attention to her. She was slowly moving against the corner of the wall, preparing to escape. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He pointed at Mei Nyang with his finger and said in a low voice, "Let's catch Mei Nyang first and find out what's going on." Zi Yuan nodded. "Okay, but it's not good to make a move here. Let's follow her first. Wait until there's no one around before we make a move." Li Yundong understood. He pulled Su Chan and slowly walked toward Mei Nyang. But Mei Nyang seemed to have never seen such a chaotic scene before. Her legs seemed to have gone soft. She leaned against the wall and moved step by step, unable to move for a long time. Li Yundong saw that although she was leaning against the wall, she was still in the field of fighting and couldn't get out of their sight. Li Yundong thought to himself, "Woman, why don't you run away and stay there to wait for death? Swords have no eyes, let alone fighting." While he was thinking, he suddenly saw Yan Fang shout loudly. Her fingers quickly pinched a few sword spells, and the zhenqi all over her body poured out like a waterfall, causing her black hair to stand on end and the corners of her clothes to dance wildly. The Liuha behind Yan Fang instantly jumped into the vast starry sky and turned into a star in the blink of an eye. Then, an ear-piercing sound of a sword came from the sky, like the roar of a dragon from the ninth heaven. Everyone on the field looked up and saw that the stars in the sky suddenly shook. Then, the stars became brighter and brighter, as if all the stars in the sky had fallen. Seeing this, some cultivators shouted in horror, "This is the unique skill of the Lingdong sect, the sword breaks the sky. Everyone, run!" Those with low cultivation immediately fled without a trace, while others immediately released their powerful magical weapons to protect themselves. Wang Jinyuan snorted coldly and waved the ruler in his hand. Suddenly, a long river of purple mist was formed above his head. This long river was so dense that it looked like a city wall. Zhang Ling slammed her hands on the ground, and with a loud bang, countless cracks appeared on the ground. These cracks were filled with red light, as if magma was surging. She grabbed out with her 5 fingers and pulled out the scorching hot magma flames from the cracks in the air. Then, she slammed her palms towards the rain of swords that was falling from the sky. Li Yundong saw that the sword rain was so terrifying. Although he, Zi Yuan, and Su Chan were not on the field, even if they were on the sidelines, he could still feel the fierce sword chi coming at him. His skin was pricked by it and had countless goosebumps. This sword rain was much fiercer than the one he had encountered when he had fought with Du Fei before. The strength and range of the attack were not the same as before. Amazing! What kind of magic is this? Li Yunyang was horrified. Although he had the extremely powerful fan of 7 treasures and the mantra Mahamudra with strong close combat ability, he didn't know any of these powerful spells of mass destruction, except for the 5 Thunder Righteous spell, which he had just learned and hadn't started yet. Zi Yuan said sternly, "This is the sword breaks the sky created by the ancestor of our Lingdong sect. It is one of the magic spells of the immortal sword. Only with a sword in hand can this move be used." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Why?" Zi Yuan said quickly, "Although there are as many magical items in the world as there are hairs on an ox, and each magical item has its own powerful side, in terms of the number of powerful magical items, the immortal sword is worthy of being the king of magical items. Whether it is the 5 great immortal swords of Taoism or the 4 great swords of Buddhism, they are all first-class magical items in the world." As the 2 of them spoke quickly, countless flying swords in the sky had already arrived in the blink of an eye and fell down. Li Yundong and the others were leaning against the corner of the wall, almost in a blind spot. They were not the first to bear the brunt of the sword rain, but there were still 1 or 2 long swords falling toward them. Li Yundong saw a long sword rushing toward his face like lightning. He subconsciously wanted to catch it with his hand, but Zi Yuan grabbed him and dodged to the side. Li Yundong only had time to tilt his head before he heard a thud. The long sword had already been inserted next to his head. The body of the sword was shaking, making a buzzing sound. Su Chan was also so scared that her whole body turned cold. She saw that the long sword was less than an inch away from her cheek. The little girl was so shocked that her eyes widened. She stared at the long sword, almost as if they were eye to eye. Li Yundong was about to comfort her when he suddenly saw a white light heading straight for Main Yang from the corner of his eye. He was shocked and blurted out, "Oh no, Main Yang." Zi Yuan and Su Chan immediately turned their heads. They saw Main Yang staring blankly at a long sword coming straight for her, but her body was so scared that she didn't move at all. "It's over. Main Yang is dead." This thought flashed through Li Yundong's mind quickly. Before he could move, he suddenly saw a figure flash by his side. This person waved his hand at the falling flying sword, and a gust of wind suddenly came out of his sleeve. With a clang, the long sword was shaken away. Li Yunyang took a closer look and saw that the man was strong, with a tiger's back and a bear's waist. He was about 1.85 meters tall. He was wearing a Taoist robe. Although the robe was loose, it could not hide the sense of explosive power coming from the inside out. Su Chan cried out in grievance, I can't help it, can I? Besides, you can stay still if I move. Li Yundong immediately cried out in grievance. He shouted, you're still talking. Which one of you touched my bottom with your knee? *CK, do you want me to die without descendants? As he said this, he glared at Su Chan, was it you? Do you want to murder your husband? Su Chan quickly shook her head. No, it wasn't me. Li Yundong couldn't help but look at Zi Yuan's face. Seeing his gaze, Zi Yuan blushed and couldn't help glaring at him. She said fiercely, who told you to put your elbow on my chest? Li Yundong was stunned. He looked down and saw that his elbow was really on Zi Yuan's chest, causing it to cave in deeply. Li Yundong smiled awkwardly and said dryly, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's a little messy, a little messy. As he said this, he reluctantly leaned back and tried to pull his elbow out, but as soon as Li Yundong moved, the fairy tied rope tightened a little. Zi Yuan couldn't hold it anymore and couldn't help shouting, don't move. It's tighter. They'll be strangled to death like this. Oh, Li Yundong said, then put his elbow back in. This time, it hit the sensitive spot on Zi Yuan's chest. Zi Yuan was ashamed and angry. Half of her body went limp. She said in a trembling voice, please don't move anymore, okay? Li Yundong laughed dryly and then glared at Su Chan next to him. Did you hear that? Don't move. Su Chan cried out, it was obviously you who moved just now. You always blame me. This is not fair. Li Yundong nudged the little girl's nose with his forehead and pretended to be angry. Nonsense, you are my woman. If I don't blame you, who should I blame? When Su Chan heard this, her anger disappeared and she felt sweet in her heart. She smiled and said heartlessly, Bah, who is your woman? You are so shameless. Seeing that the two of them were flirting shamelessly in such a situation, Zi Yuan suddenly felt a sense of defeat and powerlessness. She felt that she couldn't even vent her anger, so she said helplessly, can we get rid of this fairy-tied rope first before we talk about anything else? Li Yundong turned his face and wanted to talk to her, but the three of them were tied too tightly. As soon as he turned his face, his lips immediately touched the tip of her nose. Zi Yuan was caught off guard, and the tip of her nose was touched by Li Yundong's lips. She suddenly blushed and couldn't help but say angrily, I told you not to move. Didn't you hear me? Li Yundong had no choice but to turn his face to the side and say to Su Chan with a wronged expression, girl, you don't dislike me. I'm talking to you. Su Chan didn't realize that the three of them were in danger at all. She only felt that it was very fun and exciting to be tied up with Li Yundong. She said with a smile, okay, I won't dislike you. Seeing that the two of them were flirting with each other heartlessly, Zi Yuan couldn't help but groan gloomily. Oh my God, what have I done? Li Yundong didn't dare to turn his face again. He couldn't help saying, Zi Yuan, don't complain. We are all tied up. You have many ideas. Hurry up and think of a way. Zi Yuan said angrily, what can I do? The fairy-tied rope is a powerful magical weapon of Ju Lu Sun. It is very overbearing and powerful. The higher the cultivation of a cultivator, the more afraid they are of this powerful magical weapon. Usually, when they see it, they don't even have time to hide. You, however, reached out and touched it like a fool. Li Yundong said with a wry smile, how would I know? Why didn't you say so earlier? Zi Yuan complained, do you think I can do it faster than you? Li Yundong knew that his cultivation was still shallow. He knew a lot of theoretical knowledge about cultivation, but his understanding of magical weapons was really limited. He knew that he was in the wrong, so he smiled dryly. He blinked at Su Chan and changed the topic. By the way, who is Ju Lu Sun? Was that person just now Ju Lu Sun? Seeing that Li Yundong was winking at her, Su Chan also cooperated and said, "That's right. Zhu Lusun is one of the 12 golden immortals of Taoism. If that person was really Zhu Lusun, then all of us here would be no match for him." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Then how did that person get a powerful magical weapon like the fairy-tied rope?" Zi Yuan had been pressed against her chest by Li Yundong's elbow. She only felt that her chest was numb and soft, and there was an indescribable discomfort all over her body. She became more and more agitated and couldn't help rolling her eyes at Li Yundong. "Don't you still have the fan of 7 treasures? That's the magical weapon of the rock fox. Some of these magical weapons have been handed down for 1 or 2,000 years. Isn't it normal for them to fall into the hands of others now?" Li Yundong seemed to know why Zi Yuan was unhappy, but he didn't dare to answer her. He just smiled dryly and said, "Fairy sister, at least think of a way to get us out of here first. Are we going to be tied up like this? There should be a way to get out." Zi Yuan suppressed her anger and said, "There are only 2 ways to get rid of the fairy-tied rope. First, the owner of the magical weapon recites the incantation, and it will automatically untie itself." As Zi Yuan spoke, she felt that she was being strangled, so she struggled to take a deep breath. As soon as she took a breath, her chest rose up, and her chest pressed against Li Yundong's elbow. Li Yundong could feel it clearly. He felt awkward and strange in his heart, but he didn't dare to show any expression on his face. He smiled bitterly and said, "We can skip this one. I don't think that guy will be merciful and come back to save us. Let's go straight to the next one." After letting out a breath, Zi Yuan felt that something was wrong. She glared at Li Yundong with a red face and continued, "There's no need to talk about the other one. This fairy-tied rope is indestructible, and only heavenly thunder can strike it. Do you think that if heavenly thunder comes down, the people tied up in it will be spared?" Li Yundong took a deep breath and said, "No way. Wouldn't we just be sitting around waiting for death?" Su Chan's face was also ashen. She grabbed the corner of Li Yundong's clothes tightly and said, "Yundong, are we going to die together?" Li Yundong quickly spat and said, "Bah, jinx. It's really unlucky. How can you say such unlucky words? Don't talk nonsense. There must be a way." As he spoke, he didn't turn his face, but his eyes were squinting in Zi Yuan's direction. Seeing his strange expression, Zi Yuan found it very funny. Although they were trapped at the moment, Zi Yuan still couldn't help laughing when she thought of Li Yundong's funny actions and expressions because he didn't dare to offend her. The corners of her mouth couldn't help curling up. Seeing her like this, Li Yundong couldn't help but be overjoyed. "Zi Yuan, you must have thought of a way, right? I knew it. You're the smartest." Zi Yuan rolled her eyes at Li Yundong and said, "What can I do? Haven't you heard the name of this magical item? The fairy-tied rope. It specializes in binding immortals. Even if an immortal is tied up, he can't escape." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "But we are not immortals." Zi Yuan said, "Human beings are the beginning of immortals. The predecessors of all immortals were human beings, so human beings can also be regarded as half-immortals. Therefore, they can also be tied up." Hearing this, Li Yundong couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He said in despair, "What should we do?" At this time, Su Chan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She blurted out, "That's not right. I'm a fox spirit, not a human. You shouldn't tie me up." Hearing this, Li Yundong was stunned. A bolt of lightning suddenly flashed through his mind. He was overjoyed and said, "Yes, girl, you're so smart." Zi Yuan's eyes also lit up. She looked at Su Chan and said, "Yes, if you can transform into a fox spirit, you should be able to escape. At that time, we might be able to take advantage of your escape to escape as well." Hearing this, Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "Yes, let's do that. Girl, you. But before he could finish his words, Su Chan suddenly shook her head like a rattle drum and said loudly, No, no, I can't transform into a fox spirit. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan were anxious at the same time and asked, why not? 16b. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.